Hello guys, this is your friend Naruto Audio Fanfics and we are back with a new fanfic. Which is what if Naruto searched for paradise, and Kurama became his destiny? Part 1. And if you enjoy this fanfic then please press the like button and subscribe to my channel for more fanfic like this. And now let's start the fanfic. 6 years within Konohagakure had left quite an impression on little Uzumaki Naruto. He was the pariah of the village, mistreated and despised, but not to the extreme. Most people disliked him or simply ignored him, choosing to stay out of his way rather than confronting him. A lot of the time, he had indifference shot at him, refusing any information as to why this weird unjust was placed on a mere child like him. The references to him being a demon, by some of the more direct insults confused him. He had read about demons, in storybooks about fairy tales, and he was sure he could be nothing like them. He was rarely physically manhandled, but there would always be the occasional rough and brutal smack to the head or push to the ground when he was rejected service into some shop or restaurant. Never would the act be carried out while he was walking in the streets. It made him wonder just why that was the case, when clearly, the people passing by held that exact same glint as the mean shopkeepers. Of course, he would never forget the ones that treated him amiably and nicely, giving him far more respect than he thought he deserved. Granted, given the constant jeers and sneers he received back at the orphanage, he didn't think he deserved a lot at all. Every single time, he would ask them, with a trembling voice in both cases, just what he had done. One would reply with a venomous tone, covered up in a disparaging comment about his nature or something. The other would simply smile and sometimes even ruffle his head as a gesture of kindness and direct the conversation elsewhere. Uzumaki Naruto was not dumb. He could tell when an adult wouldn't answer a question and wanted to change the subject. After all, Sandame Oji had done it far too many times for him to even count. But then again, he didn't think to blame the old man for his misfortune, because he was in his care ever since he could remember. The old man was supposedly the leader of this village, even though little Naruto doubted him on quite a number of occasions when he found the old man giggling in a disturbing manner behind his desk while holding some sort of orange book. Sandame Oji had been the one to place him in the orphanage, and made regular visits to check up on him, making sure he was coping with the environment. The orphanage was a nice, cozy place, one where children were mostly hanging out with each other, playing and learning whenever they could, creating a comfortable atmosphere. However, certain things changed when he entered the picture. He was a common target to be bullied. His whisker-like features on his face made him stand out, and naturally, a few of the older kids didn't take too well to this. He had been ridiculed, sabotaged, and sometimes beaten whenever they felt like it, and that was certainly one part of the orphanage which he hated. However, he would somehow always be saved by the matron, Yukari-san. She was a nice lady, always treating his bruises and wounds when she came upon the scene where he was bullied. Every time, she would scold the other kids, but seeing as how she was hesitant in beating them to emphasize her point, the bullies simply mocked her behind her back, saying she was just a soft woman to be ignored. Naruto had even gotten into a few fights when the bullies jeered at how he was always running to the useless matron of theirs. Yukari-san was anything but useless. She was one of the most important people in his life so far, and he would not let her be insulted. For one, she was the one to teach him to read. It fascinated him, the stories and novels she brought with her, and while most of the others were sleeping, he would sneak to her room, and snuggle in bed with her, smiling softly as he read together with her. She was very patient with him, helping him as he stumbled over phrases he had no idea what they meant, and teaching him vocabulary that he had yet to understand. By age 5, he could already read almost anything Yukari-san gave him, and one particular storybook, the one he received for his 6th birthday this year, was a treasure he held precious more than anything he owned. It was simple fairy tale, where a baby bird was born, growing and striving through the mishaps thrown at it, and finally taking flight into a night sky filled with stars where it gained its freedom, spreading its wings as it glided into the distance. Yukari-san was extremely pleased at how much he seemed to like her present, and when asked what the moral of the story was, the 30-year-old woman thought for a moment, before answering, well, the normal one people would tell you, would be that no matter what hardships you face, you must endure and persevere. Because in the end, it'll all pay off. But from my point of view, it says something more. Do you see it? With wide eyes, he gazed at her in something akin to fascination. What might that be? He had asked. She had smiled softly and replied, everything in this world is a part of a bigger picture. You and I belong to this village, Kanahagakure, and this village, in turn, belongs to a country. The country is mere land to the earth. The earth itself is part of the universe. And who knows what might be beyond that? That very night, her words etched deep in his mind, as she ruffled his hair. What I'm saying is, no matter how minor a thing might seem to be, it'll always contribute to the bigger picture. Let's take you for an example, Naruto. Me. He had pointed at himself with his finger and tilted his head, disbelief all over his face at hearing that he could actually contribute stuff. Yes, you, dear Naruto. You are like the bird in the sky. You gave me what I never had, you set me free, you gave me a heart. Her eyes closed as she gave him a kiss on the forehead. I never thought I could live a life like this when I retired from the ranks. I couldn't believe it when Sandaime-sama assigned me this job. But now I know, and I relish in the fact that I have found you, Naruto. You are very important to me. I am. His round eyes blinked repeatedly, before he broke into a wide smile that was mirrored on the face of Yukari-san as well. Yes, you are. You are an adorable little boy that can make me forget all my hardships in a heartbeat. That is what the story means, Naruto. Bonds like this need to be created before understandings can be established. Villages are built on these links and countries are formed from these trusts. You might be a small part of all of this, Naruto, but you'll always be important to me. Her hand gently traced itself around his cheek. I'll always be there for you, just like I know you'll always be there for me. Won't you, Naruto? She teased. Of course. I'll beat up anyone that dares bully you. He had declared with a huff, raising his fist in what he thought would be a menacing stance. Haha. Why thank you, my little knight. However, remember, violence is not always the option. Hi, you always say that, Yukari-san. Because that is something you should remember, Naruto. That way, you might hurt yourself less in the future. Don't wanna. Haha. Is that so? Then I guess I'll have to look after you for the rest of your life. Yay. You said that. You said that, didn't you? No going back on those words. My, you're a cunning little devil, aren't you? Alright, I won't go back on those words. Promise. Yes, I promise. Really? Yes, it's a promise of a lifetime. Ah, I believe you. As do I, Naruto. Now, off to bed, it's getting late. Ah, do I have to? Come now, don't whine. Men don't whine, hee hee. Of course they do. I do. Now, nay, can I please sleep here with you tonight? I feel safer. Alright, but you have to be quiet once the lights are out. No more chattering from you, or I will kick you from my bed, understood? Yes, I'll be a good boy. Very good. Now, reaching over, she turned off the lights, and in a flash, the room was shrouded in darkness. Good night, Naruto. Good night, Yukari-san. That very night, Menace Yukari found herself cradling Naruto like a treasured friend, gently tapping him to sleep before she kissed him on the forehead. Arigato, Naruto. The stars outside shone bright as the moonlight cascaded through the windows. Raising her head, she looked out at the beautiful night sky. Yes, like a star, in my nights, you'll always be a part of me. That is how much you mean to me, Naruto. But little Naruto didn't hear her and simply snuggled deeper into her bosom, sleeping peacefully as time passed by. Many would not understand just why Yukari cared so much for Naruto. At the age of 28, the woman could hardly bear the harsh realities being an Anbu always seemed to reveal. The horrors and bloodshed she had witnessed were enough to torment her for a lifetime. She had finally reached breaking point and petitioned for a release from being a shinobi entirely, and surprisingly, Sandaime-sama had agreed. However, it was under the condition that she took up a civilian job so as to conceal her identity. She complied, and to her utmost surprise, she was made to be a matron of the orphanage. She had protested, wondering just how Sandaime-sama could trust her with such tender children of her age, and the old man had simply smiled and told her to give it a try. It was here that she met Uzumaki Naruto, the enigma and legacy of Yondaime-sama. Such a brilliant child, scorned by the village for something he had no control of, and hated for being associated with the real demon, Kyuubi no Kitsune, she couldn't believe that it was this beautiful being they were referring to. Such naive and gentle eyes, such tenderness and grace within him, and a heart bigger than any she had ever seen. Always willing to give new things a go, insatiable in his thirst for knowledge and love, yearning for contact with different people so as to understand his environment better. He was a gem, waiting to be developed and thoroughly explored, and yet few would look past their prejudices and get to know the real him. He had given her a purpose in life, just when she thought that the world was made of nothing but killing and slaughter, where might makes right, she was reminded of the purity of souls in the form of Uzumaki Naruto. It was ironic that life could undergo such a change, from utterly chaotic to a tranquility she had never believed existed. She cared for him like no one she had before, because she too was once an orphan. She had no loved one, for in their occupation, couples barely survived. She had seen enough of the tragedies in her own squad to know that getting too involved emotionally was a bad mistake. But all that changed when she saw Naruto. She came to understand him, love him and adore him. He was truly her everything. Being a civilian sounded boring at the start, but as of now, she knew of nothing better she could be, as long as it meant that Naruto was with her. Sandaime Sama was extremely pleased with this development and asked if she could continue taking care of Naruto. An instant yes, was her reply. Staring at the young boy by her side, she couldn't help but pray that the life does not take an unpleasant turn like it did for her. She wanted him to stay safe, stay bright and stay happy. But given his life, and his parents' blood within him, she knew it wouldn't be long before something would happen. He was born to be a shinobi, born to shoulder the heavy burden that was placed on him, and, Yukari strongly believed, that he was born to create a paradise that was long lost in this world, one where no more tragedies had to happen, one where no more children cried for the loss of parents on the battlefield, one where people could actually feel safe in their beds without worrying for their lives tomorrow. Lacing her fingers within his hair, she had smiled. A soft, gentle smile. She was reminded of the time when Naruto had proposed to her, declaring right after they read a fairy tale that he would be her prince, and marry her. It was such an adorable expression that she couldn't help but kiss him on the cheek. His honesty touched her heart and she found herself replying in the affirmative when Naruto asked her to wait for him. She had dismissed it as a joke, but there was always something in his eyes that made her think otherwise. Bright as the sky, they burn with resolve. Yes, he would be the one to do it. She could feel it. Only one with as kind a heart as him would be able to accomplish the impossible. And she would be with him, like she promised. Always. However, life shall soon change for her, where she became the first sacrifice within this lost paradise. Although, there was one thing that would be the key catalyst in ensuring her new life. Uzumaki Naruto never lost, and never will. Dreams were special things indeed, that Naruto had been taught countless times. They could be anything and everything, and one should never be surprised nor afraid of what they were dreaming of. This was one of the reasons Naruto never questioned why he was visiting a blood-red cage in an underground sewer when he was 3. He had ventured there, completely unaware of his surroundings, making cheerful noises at being able to have an adventure of his own while asleep. Yukari-san was always so careful with him, not wanting him to take any risks, and he had to miss out on so much fun. But she did it for his good, so he didn't mind it too much. However, this was so exciting. The metal bars proved no resistance for him as he simply waddled his way through the gaps and peeked inside. All was dark except for a huge bundle of red in the middle of the cage. Twin irises of white flashed open and a snarl was heard before a wave of energy was directed at him. The fairy tales Yukari-san read to him constantly told of special beings and supernatural forces, hence little Naruto barely paid it any attention as he continued to reach out, his tiny fingers stretching towards the thing. The eyes widened as the wave simply parted while the hand proceeded on without fear, the boy's smile glowing in contrast to the dim setting of this place. Before it could react accordingly, the boy had touched its fur, before staring up at it bemusedly. "Why are you in this form?" Thoroughly taken aback, it had roared and tried to shake the boy out of the room, wanting to be rid of this nuisance of a jailer it had. However, the boy simply frowned and pouted, before tapping it on the paw. "Bad Kitsune. Bad Kitsune. It's polite to answer a question when someone asks you. Yukari-san told me so." It had marveled at the perfect speech patterns of the young one, and how he had shown no signs of stuttering, unlike normal human kids. Yet it was more chided by its complete lack of control in this situation. Growling bitterly, it wondered whether this was what it meant to be sealed, robbed of its power, and dethroned from its pinnacle of strength into this dark abyss. For some reason, the kid didn't even show the slightest amount of fear, and with good reason. The mighty Kyuubi could do nothing against its jailer, not without risking its existence erased from this plane. The boy had then tilted his head. Why do you look like this? His little hands were rubbing on its fur, making it quite difficult to force back the purr that was on its lips. There was something extremely comforting and at the same time, alluring to the kitsune. It was uncanny to think that one of its status would even consider any action by a mere mortal attractive, but this boy. I asked you a question. Why do you look like this? He wouldn't relent. No matter what it tried to do to remove him from its presence, it failed to work. Finally, it had no other choice besides shaking its head and plopping back down onto the ground. Little Naruto frowned, before shaking it once again. Nay, tell me. Kyuubi ignored him, and proceeded to close its eyes, wanting all of this to be a dream. A really bad dream. There were so many conflicts within its conscience, seeing how immortal, a boy was actually talking to it, was actually touching it like it was a common pet, and had the nerve to tell it what was right and wrong. He, a 3-year-old. That's not the worst bit though. The problem was, it enjoyed it. The nerve. Call it a stupid fox for all it cared, but it had been years since it even had contact, well, peaceful contact with another being, regardless of it being mortal or immortal. The other clans of Yami Darkness within the Summons universe had isolated it as an individual unit, unwilling to have anything to do with it, seeing how it was possibly the strongest dark demon to ever appear in their realm. The irony was that there should be no such thing as a light demon, and hence, there really wasn't anything scary with it being a dark one in the first place. But no, the ones who ally themselves for the greater good would be classified as the noble ones, while the outcasts, Yami, were left to fend for themselves. Kyuubi no Kitsune was an entirely new addition to the plane where the day it made its first appearance struck fear into every single one of them, establishing that sense of power that would soon to become associated with it. The Kitsune clan itself wasn't exactly a summon, seeing how there was no summoner worthy or cunning enough for them to even notice. It had reached the epitome of the Kitsune, 9 taels worth of power at its free disposal, and yet, because of that very power, it was banished. Jealous bastards, all of them. While it was being caught up in this windmill of memories, little Naruto had pouted, displeased at how he was ignored, but suddenly, something caught his eyes. The sad look on the fox's face made him think of the words Yukari-san used to tell him. Perhaps it was instinct that made him do it. Or rather, he thought that everyone deserved to be happy. And hence, it was with great surprise, when Kyuubi suddenly realized Naruto was sitting on its nose, right between its eyes. While it was musing over its past, it would seem that the brat had crawled and climbed on her fur, and steadily made his way to its face with agility and flexibility one would not expect from a 3-year-old. Before it could even retort, Naruto had leaned forward, chubby little hands holding onto its fur, before placing a soft kiss on the bridge of its nose. By then, Kyuubi was completely dumbfounded. There was simply no telling what else this little devil would do to surprise it more. Why did he just kiss a demon? Why would he, its jailer, bother to first come into its cage, be nice to it, and finally, kiss it? What is wrong with this brat? And then, Naruto had smiled, his eyes closed with his brows curved happily. There we go. You're not sulking anymore. Why? Waving his hands in joy, he giggled as he placed yet another kiss on the same spot. Happy woman. Happy woman. Kyuubi had at first wrinkled its nose in slight disgust at being treated like a plaything, but then, the full force of little Naruto's declaration hit her. Did he just call it a woman? No, that cannot be. There was no way a brat like him would be able to see through the illusion. So, why do you look like a fox? Blinking, he asked in a chirpy voice. If Kyuubi could, it would have had its jaws dislocated and thrown into the depths of hell, never to be found again. But of course, it wasn't that stupid. So no, it chose to simply make incoherent noises that sounded like gasping denials and vehement protests, but eventually, all it took was a third kiss from little Naruto to get it to shut up. Mo, you really are a weird lady, Kitsune-san. Why won't you answer my question? HMPH. Crossing his arms, or trying to. Naruto assumed what he thought was a stern expression, one much like how Sandame Gigi used to look when he was in the office working on papers. By that time, Kyuubi had finally resigned to its fate and sighed, before an aura surrounded its being. It wasn't long before it began shape-shifting to assume the posture of an elegant woman dressed in a loosely clad kimono. Vibrant crimson hair lined her porcelain face, and barefooted, she stood with little Naruto in her arms, a pensive expression on her face. Meanwhile, the little blonde was clapping his hands, yay. It was utterly unthinkable that a mere child could understand the finer arts of shapeshifting. Long ago, it was common knowledge that all intellectual demons with power were able to morph into a human form, simply because they usually needed to interact with humans, mostly as summons. However, that particular power seemed to have died out as the summons only retained their abilities to speak and think like humans on top of their basic demonic personalities, and from then on, the ability to shapeshift was exclusively reserved for the Kitsune clan of the Summon realm. In fact, all the fairy tales and legends of Kitsune being able to change shape was quite true. There was another fact that some rumors and folktales did include, but not widely believed. All Kitsune were females. There was no exception. It was the one true trait that made them the most peculiar, and hence, far stronger species than any of the other summons. Kitsune were well known to excel in illusions and fire abilities, and their outstanding wits and cunning natures led them to be one of the most mystified legends to be born to the human world. All of the above mentioned advantages lead to a common ability, and that would be seduction. In the history of mankind, there had been multiple cases of how certain men would be led astray by extremely beautiful women who had flair and intelligence beyond any women they have ever met. Eventually, they would disappear from their towns and be lost forever. That was work of Kitsune mating with them. Kitsune had to mate with humans, and humans only, and usually there would be two outcomes. 1. The male dies because of overdose demonic energy. 2. Male becomes a Hanyu, half demon. Most cases die right after that, but there were some specific examples where the Kitsune truly loved its mate and did all that it could to ensure a life together with him. However, the fact remained that the Hanyu had a shorter lifespan than a true Kitsune, and hence they were never allowed to be the clan leader of the Kitsune. It was an instinct for all Kitsune to create an illusion of themselves when in foreign territory or another realm, to ensure their survival, and not letting others figure out their true identity. Kyuubi had been there for only a few years, before it was entrapped inside this child. It never even occurred to her that someone might have discovered her identity, much less by a 3-year-old. However, thinking back to the sealing process, perhaps the powers from the gods realm had leaked into the child's body due to the insane complexity of the Hake Shiki Fuin, and Naruto had somehow connected with her abilities as a Kitsune. Seeing through them was probably a piece of cake for the brat now. Sighing, Kyuubi was about to place Naruto onto the ground when the boy asked again, Nay, can you speak? Raising an eyebrow at the question, the red-haired lady opened her mouth and was about to utter a retort, only to find that indeed, she still couldn't speak. Her surprise was written all over her face and Naruto pouted. Why was she frowning again? Kyuubi, on the other hand, had 1,000 thoughts running through her mind. She had always figured that because she was holding up an illusion within a jailer, she really didn't have any other energy to speak, and hence after lifting said illusion, it would come to reason that her voice should be back. Just what was going on? MWA. Blinking, she looked down at the mop of blonde hair. Did the brat just kiss her? MWA. On the lips. So soft, I like. Oh, you're not frowning anymore. Yay. MWA. There was nothing she could do. She could express her disbelief at the ridiculous situation where her 3-year-old jailer had just kissed her 6 times or so to, apparently, make her stop frowning. I'm Naruto. Uzumaki Naruto. What's your name? At that, the pretty lady's face fell. A grimace crossed her expression and little Naruto wondered why she looked so sad. She had no name. She was always an outcast, and now banned from the Kitsune clan, doomed to dwell in the Yami regions of the Summon realm. Once again, She opened her mouth, and when no voice came out, she shook her head. Turning, she eyed her 9 tails and smiled bitterly, before using one of the tails and writing on the walls, Q Bai, in kanji. Ooh, Q-chan. Nay, how come you have 9? The kitsune couldn't help but smile at the sheer vibrancy her jailer seemed to ooze at all times, and despite chiding herself for succumbing to curiosity, she began her first conversation with little Naruto. Years passed, and as Naruto slept, he would always visit Q-chan, keeping her company. Be it playing with her tails or asking her questions that he couldn't understand, he would do his best to ensure Kyuubi made some sort of response. The environment at which they met slowly began to change each time Naruto interacted with the kitsune. For every smile and silent laughter the kitsune gave, the water within the sewer would retreat. For the first year, Naruto had succeeded in driving away all the stinky liquid from the place. By the second year, the gloomy setting was gone. When he was 6, the cage was practically non-existent, for Naruto had deemed it a nuisance every time he had to slide through it to meet Q-chan. It was now simply a room, with carpets on the floor, because Naruto liked them soft, and special futon for the kitsune, very large where Naruto would always curl himself in Q-chan's tails, and sleep while she gently caressed his cheek. Naruto adored them both, Yukari-san, and Q-chan, and had long since sworn to himself, that he would always protect them, and be friends with them, and generally, make them the happiest women on earth. That was his dream. He had exclaimed it to both females, and surprisingly enough, they had the same reactions. They simply pulled him into a warm embrace where they just stayed there for a few moments, before the female would place a kiss on his forehead and distract him by either reading a novel with him, Yukari-san, or getting him to sleep, Q-chan. However, bad things do happen, and exactly on his 7th birthday, one where the entire orphanage had gathered together to celebrate, even the ones that bullied him before had participated, unexpected arrivals along with twisted beliefs destroyed the day. It wasn't the villagers. It wasn't even random drunkards this time. They wore masks over them, quite like the Anbu that used to watch over Naruto. But somehow, they felt different, like they were dead on the inside. Their cold tones and voices about how the demon had to be exterminated did the job. All hell broke loose from then onwards. Naruto didn't know who they were, or why they called him a demon. But Yukari-san did, and all she uttered since their arrival was a hateful snarl, nay. Root. On the streets outside of the orphanage. Danzo. What is the meaning of this? Sarutobi eyed his old rival with distaste and barely controlled rage at the current situation. He had been notified that there were suspicious men heading towards Naruto's orphanage, and seeing how there weren't any shinobi from other countries that would target that specific place, he decided to be cautious and ordered a squad of Anbu to go with him. Imagine his surprise when Danzo of all people was standing there, blocking his entrance into the orphanage with his own battered body. Behind him were no doubt those traitorous Anbu he named. Nay, supposedly the elite in terms of killing efficiency. There was simply no understanding why the old bat would risk everything on this, his political status, his shinobi status and his citizenship within Konoha, because as Hokage, Sarutobi had every right to simply remove him from the premise. That would normally happen had Danzo not have the backing of several power-thirsty council members along with a few of the minor clans who bore hatred and jealousy at being gradually forgotten over the years. The only relief Sarutobi had was that the civilian council sided with him unanimously, and would never sway over to Danzo's side, for the simple fact that they wanted to be safe, and after years of experience, they trust the Hokage to be in charge with their lives. Danzo was well known to be a reckless man, extremely so, spouting nonsense about going to war every 5 minutes in council meetings, and as much as the crafty old man tried to wrestle control over the civilian council with Sarutobi, it was a given fact that none of them wanted to go to war, and see their shinobi friends, relatives and family die once again, like that horrible Iwa war years ago. No, they wanted to stay safe, and Sarutobi didn't disappoint. Sure, they disagreed over certain things, like whether Naruto should be instated in an orphanage at all, for fear that the Kyuubi might suddenly break loose, but then again, as much as the civilians hated to admit it, they knew the Sandaime was right. The kid wasn't Kyuubi at all. Anyone with the least amount of sense could see that the poor soul was such a gentle boy, with such a love for nature and an intrigue in the overall surroundings itself that it couldn't possibly be the Kyuubi. A few stubborn ones told themselves it was an illusion, set up by the Kyuubi to deceive them all. But even they slowly began to relent after witnessing with their very eyes how the little boy had tended to small stray animals on the streets, how he would eagerly help out with those who accepted him wherever he could. And the orphanage itself. It was proof that he was simply a child more than anything. The cheers of laughter whenever Naruto was in the game always drew a crowd to the windows to simply watch on as the kids played. The mere fact that the other orphans would stand up for Naruto when he was being bullied or insulted proved that he was just another kid suffering the aftereffects of that abyss. The attack by Kyuubi 6 years ago was simply too terrifying, and the loss of the citizens of Konoha was greater than any had ever suffered. It was pandemonium and chaos all at once, and the fear escalated to a level that the headstrong citizens of Konoha never thought was possible. And in the midst of all this confusion, they needed a release. They needed a scapegoat, someone to channel their frustration, angst and anxiety through. They found Naruto to be adequate, and repeatedly convinced themselves that he was nothing but a demon. Well, it kind of worked for what, a few months at best. The baby itself was every bit the definition of charm, as it went. Crystal clear blue irises, sun-kissed blonde hair framing that chubby little face, and those whisker marks. Most of them instantly deduced it as the marks of a demon, but after staring at it for a while, they simply couldn't help it. It felt like a sin that such a baby would have to bear those marks for the rest of his life, and on the contrary, those marks were extremely enticing and irresistibly cute. The females had no chance against it, and on a more serious level, neither did the males. Kyuubi had red fur, red eyes. Naruto did not. It was all the proof needed for at least half the civilians to take on a neutral approach. A select few went on to help this Naruto kid, seeing how he was an orphan and all that. The rest, well, kept up the facade that they hated Naruto, but even then, it was done half-heartedly. One dejected look after a harsh comment would leave the person feeling guilty that he would maintain that disgusted expression for a while longer just so he could briskly walk away and try to forget what he had just done. The citizens of Konoha weren't blockheads that were too blinded by hatred or anything. There was a reason why Konoha could become the strongest shinobi village out of the 5 lands. They had emotions such as love and friendship and the so-called forbidden feelings of the shinobi code to power them, and because other villages stuck to the protocol that emotions only served to hinder you, Konoha was beyond that. From the Shodai Hokage right down to the Yondaime, all of them discredited that particular rule, reasoning that emotions would only hinder someone if they let it rule them. Emotions are to be controlled and expressed by the user, not the other way round. The shinobi of Konoha had the backing of their friends, families and comrades and hence was able to persevere through the hardships. However, there would always be a group that detested this ideal, and chose to resist, insisting that they would be fine alone, and that sharing was below them. Danzo was one of this people, and hence, his secret army of Nei was all trained to become like him, devoid of emotion, embracing their selfish desires even if it meant harm to their own comrades. Those were the ones standing before him right now, determined to see that they get their way in what they wanted. Sarutobi bristled in anger as he spoke in a deathly tone. Do you understand what you're doing, Danzo? The cripple military fanatic simply smirked cruelly. Of course I understand. We are here to ensure that our beloved Hokage witness this glorious moment in history, where the demon that brought such disgrace onto us gets what it deserved 6 years ago. Danzo, I'm warning you. It's been long enough, Sarutobi. You've let that thing of yours go on for far too long. It needs to be removed now. Waving a hand at the shinobi behind him, he continued, you'll either give in now, or you face a civil war. At this, the atmosphere grew ever tenser as the Sandaime Hokage stared Danzo down. Do you forget who you're talking to, Danzo? In a flash, 50 or so Anbu appeared behind him. I am the Hokage. My word is law in this village. Taking a step forward, I was, and still am, the shinobi professor, or do I need to remind you that I am the god of war? His eyes narrowed as he glared at Danzo. You are nothing but a cripple man, both physically and mentally. Temper flaring, the Nei leader growled, you'll regret those words, Sarutobi. Enough bantering. I'm asking you right out. Do you agree to the public execution of the demon? Sarutobi stared at him coolly. There is no demon in our village. I do not understand what you are talking about. Don't be smart with me. Danzo snarled. You know very well who I'm talking about. Silence. Chakra pouring out of him. Sarutobi's aura instantly magnified, causing the Nei leader to flinch slightly. Know your place, Danzo. I will not repeat myself. Pointing his hand to the streets, he replied, leave at once. Instead of feeling threatened, Danzo smiled. I see. You dug your own grave. I was hoping for the entire village to see the demon's head fall to the ground, but I suppose the pleasure would be only mine. Nay. Attention. In blurs, they reappeared in a circle, surrounding Sarutobi and his Anbu, poised and ready to strike. Kill any that dare interfere with this. I am declaring a rebellion against a fool of a Hokage. Oh, and men, prepare the bombs. Hi. Sarutobi's eyes widened, before realization dawned on him. Gritting his teeth, he roared, Danzo. Pity, Sarutobi, pity. I didn't think you would be so cruel as to let other children sacrifice their lives for the sake of a demon. Didn't think you had it in you, to be honest. His smirk was back at full force, a crazed look appearing on his face, making his facial features all the more jarring, but it all ends here. It will die, and that's final. You were a fool to not make it into the weapon that I suggested. Bring him out. By now, quite the crowd was gathered around the area. Almost everyone from the village had caught wind to what was going on, and came to see. Shinobi and civilians alike could only gasp in horror as little 6-year-old Naruto was dragged out onto the courtyard by his hair, manhandled by a Nei officer, before he was kicked to the ground. The other children were herded aside. However, it was evident that they would not stay still, as some even tried to go to Naruto. What are you doing to him? Stop. Don't kick him. Naruto. Hang in there. The Nei officers didn't hear them and simply pushed them aside, with 5 officers surrounding a downed Naruto. The boy was staring up at them in confusion and anger, wondering what he had done to deserve all this. Let him go this instant. Who the hell do you think you are? Yukari-san was bound by ropes and couldn't do anything to save him. Danzo laughed. Yes, this is the moment I've been waiting for. Demon, I'm giving you the chance to reveal yourself so that you do not lose your dignity as you die. Drop the illusion and embrace your death. Little Naruto was kicked to kneel in front of Danzo as the man held a blade over the boy. Danzo, I'm warning you. Sarutobi snarled as he looked about to take a risk. I suggest you rethink your options, oh mighty Sandame. I trust you do not want this place to be demolished. This bomb is a special invention of mine. He twirled it in his hand. You see, the explosion would kill everyone here, including the civilians. I suggest you shut up and watch, like you should have done all these years. His eyes narrowed. Do you understand me? No one dared move after hearing this declaration, and could only stare on in shock as the event played itself out. None of this was making any sense. Everyone was taken over by the absolute surprise of this, and couldn't make coherent responses to this. Now, where were we? That's right. Demon, reveal yourself. Without hesitation, Danzo stabbed the sword into Naruto's arm, earning a shriek of pain from the boy. Naruto. Yukari-san shouted as she watched on helplessly. The Nei had already taken measures to seal her chakra pathways temporarily, and since they outnumber her, she couldn't put up much of a fight. Besides, the other children were in danger as well, and hence, she had opted to play the docile prisoner until she had her chance, but. I said reveal yourself. A second slice followed, this time across Naruto's face, drawing blood as the boy squirmed on the floor, trying to shake off the pain. It was a ghastly sight to behold, and before long, most of the civilians and shinobi were protesting, demanding that Danzo stop this. Pathetic demon. How long are you going to keep up the facade that you're one of us? Do not mock us. Reveal yourself. 2 slashes to the torso elicited yet another yell of agony from the poor little boy. Never before had the kid felt such pain, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. Do you see now? All these slashes mean nothing. He's healing right before us as we speak. Is this the sign of a human being? Is it? With each pause, he stabbed at the boy, and before long, pain-filled cries permeated the area. Stop it. Please. Just stop it. One of the girls at the orphanage began crying. Stop making Naruto-chan hurt. Yeah. Why are you making him cry? You're all bad people. Stop hurting him. Get away from him. Yeah. Silence. Danzo roared at the children, causing them all to shrink back in fear, Ignorant fools, what you see before you is the image of a demon, as it should be, begging for its life as it licks my feet. Yet another slice later. Uzumaki Naruto does not exist, all that it is a demon. Now, one last time, reveal yourself. This time, sword simply pierced through his stomach, causing Naruto to choke on the blood in his mouth, unable to even scream anymore. Sarutobi had charged forward as all this took place, but one twitch of the bomb in Danzo's hand had him stay rooted to his spot. This bastard had definitely planned it well. I see that this village needs some punishing for actually helping the demon too. I fail to see why humans would actually stoop so low as to save a demon that should be dead. Nay. The children's eyes grew fearful as they were herded towards the disgusting old man. Sarutobi's eyes widened. Danzo. With a flick of his wrist, the Nei leader released the bomb in his hands, causing it to explode, taking with it a huge chunk of the orphanage behind them and a few residences around it. I'm serious, Sarutobi. Do not test my patience. The Sandame could only wonder where he obtained such powerful weapons. There had been no signs of any suspicious activity prior to this at all. You, girl, come over here. And no. I said, come over here. Reaching out, he grabbed the little girl by the wrist and wrenched her over to Naruto, causing her to cry out in pain. Here, demon. Since you want to prove that you're nice, let's strike a deal. Reveal yourself and I won't do this. One swift motion later, the girl screamed out in agony as blood spurted from her hand, revealing a huge wound that Danzo had just inflicted on her. No. And no. Na Nanako-chan. Little Naruto coughed as he tried to stand up. Let her go. I don't know what you mean, but please, let her go. His throat was raw from all the yelling. Still playing games, are we? Well then, too bad. Raising his blade, he shook his head mockingly. She dies. Wah. Before his very eyes, the blade impaled itself on Nanako's shoulder, eliciting yet another scream from the poor girl. No. Naruto sprung from the ground towards Danzo. Let her go. With ease, the Nei leader smacked him back to the ground, with the blade pointed towards the girl. Pathetic demon. Who do you think you're talking to? Nanako. For your insolence, this is the result. A slice later, the girl lay dead on the ground. No. The uproar from the crowd plus the outrage of Sarutobi didn't faze Danzo in the least. You see what happens when a demon is among us. They pollute us, lie to us and make us befriend them, before leading us to our deaths. Simply disgusting. Little Naruto had crawled over to Nanako. Nanako-chan, Nanako-chan, wake up. Shaking her lightly, he shivered as the lack of warmth on her body hit him. No, Nanako-chan, you haven't had breakfast yet. We were supposed to play all day, and then make a tiara from those pretty flowers we found that day. Nanako-chan. Enough of this foolishness. Danzo rammed his knee into little Naruto, causing him to fall over as the blade struck him once again. But this time, Naruto held the gasp of pain in, staring up at the Nei leader with fury and misery in his eyes. Why did you kill her? I didn't kill her. You did. No. I saw you. You killed her with your sword. Because you confounded her. You made her think you were her friend. I saved her by killing her, lest she spread the disease further. Danzo spoke with absolute arrogance, his lone eye trained on Naruto as he pushed the blade deeper into Naruto's body. Now scream. And scream he did, as the blade not only pierced his lungs, but went right through his back. The pain was unbearable, and nothing Naruto did could make it stop. It wasn't just him that was in pain, Nanako-chan. It's your fault, demon. None of this would have happened had you not existed. Danzo continued, your existence itself is a crime. My existence is a crime. Precisely. Grab the boy over. And once again, the other boy that had spoken up for Naruto was brought over to Naruto, with the blade held at his neck. I ask you again, will you reveal yourself? No. Don't do it. Don't harm Jiro. The poor boy was hysterical by now, fear gripping his heart at the very sight of his playmate being threatened in this way. Will you reveal yourself? I will. I will. I'm this demon you keep saying. Just let Jiro go. Tears were falling down his cheeks as he tried to do his best to appease this insane old man to let his friend go. I'll count to 3. Wah. 1. I don't. 2. No wait. 3. Jiro fell to the ground, devoid of any life. Too slow. Demon. No. Clutching the dead body of his friend, he cried even harder, "Why did you do that? I said I am the demon already, didn't I? Why did you kill him?" Danzo simply shook his head. "I grow tired of this. Fine. Be obstinate about your false identity. Carry it to your death with you. Nay. Burn him alive." Danzo began his walk back towards Sarutobi, an arrogant smirk on his lips. "Oh." Turning his head, he gestured towards the children. "Burn them too." "Hi. Danzo-sama." "No." The crowd gasped in horror, unable to do anything but watch as the officers poured cans of oil onto the children, ignoring their sputtering and struggles, their cries and shrieks, only carrying out their duties like the mindless robots they were. "I'm going to show you, Sarutobi, what it's like to suffer my wrath." Danzo laughed as he gazed at the furious look on his face. "It's a pity, really. Had there been no hostages, you might have been able to stop me. But it's all too late. Not even you could get past 50 NA officers to prevent me from throwing this match." Lighting it up, Danzo simply shook his head. "This is the end." Flicking it with his finger, his eyes traced the match gleefully as he cackled at the final demise of the demon. "Die. Enough." Yukari simply couldn't handle it any longer. Nanako and Jiro had died, killed by this perverse man, and now, Naruto and the rest of them were about to be burned alive. There was no way she could allow that to happen, even if it meant her life. Breaking off the ropes around her, she charged forth. Because the NA officers thought she was a mere civilian, only a few of her tenketsu were sealed. In a brutally efficient move, her arm locked itself around the neck of one of the NA officers, snapping it as she dashed past, using her momentum to easily execute the move. She was one of the finest Anbu under the Sandame's rule, and it was no surprise that she knew how to kill someone in the fastest way possible. As a female, her flexibility, agility and speed were her aces, and it showed as she took all 3 NA officers surrounding her by surprise, ending their lives before they could react accordingly. The last one had succeeded in placing a cut on her arm, but that was it. His right arm was sticking out through his back after Yukari was done with him. In one desperate move, she flung the debris of rope on her at the matchstick, successfully pushing it out of its original route, causing it to land away from the oil-drenched children. However, the matchstick had rolled back, flames refusing to die as it sparked the oil drops on the ground, burning up a trail to the children as it surged towards them, threatening to engulf them. "Naruto." The crippled old man seemed startled as this woman advanced on him with alarming speed. Narrowing his eyes, he waved his hand. "Finish her off." In no time, Yukari found herself engaging 10 NA officers, fully armed and ready to kill. She, on the other hand, had nothing but her fists and a slightly impaired chakra system, along with years of experience to pull her through. But none of that mattered. All she could think of was to protect Naruto. Somehow forcing her way through them, she dashed with all her might and landed in front of Naruto, her arms spread out, holding Naruto in them, her knees firmly etched into the ground. The crash caused a small crater to form before Naruto and the others, cutting off the fire in the nick of time. "Yukari-san." Naruto gasped. "Are you all right, Naruto?" However, before the little boy could reply, he felt Yukari-san's body shudder consecutively, before he felt pain at his stomach. "Yukari-san." When he looked up, the blood dripping from her lips was enough to get him frantic. "Yukari-san." Lowering his head, he saw that 5 blades had torn through her body, with the intention of taking her life along with Naruto's. Naruto. He couldn't speak. He didn't know what to do. Her trembling hands gently caressed his face as she held him closer. Don't be bafr raid. You're bleeding. You're hurt. It's OOKK. Yukari-san. Her fragile smile broke his heart as she leaned on him, her body lacking the strength to stay upright as her life slowly faded away. There it was, the opening Sarutobi had been waiting for all along. Danzo had been distracted by the outburst of Yukari, and without any more hesitation, he charged into the fray. Bypassing the defense, Sarutobi had reached Danzo in a fury, disabling him in a series of brutal grasps as he ensured that the man would never be able to activate any of the weapons he had planted. The Anbu had all acted accordingly, and it became an all-out war against Ne, where jutsu and weapons flew everywhere. Screams of worry and agony as the civilians rushed to take cover, and the other shinobi joining in the fray. There was no longer any time to hesitate as all Konoha shinobi took on the Ne, determined to put an end to the growth of these corrupted roots. Even as the surroundings became a lot more chaotic than before, Naruto didn't care. All he focused on was the fact that Yukari-san was dying. Do why you re me mber, and Naruto. What IP promised. Yes. Yes. I remember. Please, stop talking, you need to save your strength. Tears were flowing down his cheeks as he held on to Yukari tightly. Please don't leave me. A soft chuckling was heard, and though she coughed up more blood, her eyes remained gentle and seemed devoid of suffering. Ul little b baka. Her hands lightly framed his face as she kissed him lightly on the forehead. L like a star, in my night, YUW will always be a part of me. No. No. Yukari-san. Watching her close her eyes, fear overwhelmed him as he desperately held on to the woman he adored, Yukari-san. Remember, I love you, Naruto. Yukari-san. Yukari-san. And as her body slouched onto his, her breathing stopped. Naruto could only hold her there, his mind numb from the shock. Yukari-san was dead. No. He shook his head. No. No. A rush of power erupted within him as he desperately called out in his mind, no. I won't let her die. As though beckoning his call, a certain pair of eyes opened, and for the first time in 6 years, she spoke in a quiet voice, it's time. And everything turned gray. Naruto stared at the female before him, the same lady that he had kept company for 6 years every night. Hugh-chan. Please. Help her. The redhead simply gazed at him, and a voice sounded in his mind, will you do anything to save her? Will you give up your life for her? Yes. I will. I will do anything. So please, oh, I beg you, please help me. He was desperate, his mind in a frenzy, unable to think, unable to act. He was but a 6-year-old, he was but a child. He couldn't do anything. He was weak. He let this happen. He caused Yukari-san's death. It was all his fault. And all he could do was sob, with her dead body in his arms, and repeatedly beg Q-chan to somehow help him. He didn't know what to do. He didn't know anything. Will you swear on your soul that you will never regret this decision? Her eyes bore into his, her face expressionless as she watched him. For some reason, all the fear Naruto felt seemed detached in that moment. It was as if he was separated into another dimension, one devoid of all feelings, only allowing reason of thought to be processed. His mind could only focus on the sentence Yukari-san had said to him. Like a star, in my night, you'll always be a part of me. It's okay. Eyes widening, he saw a familiar man with blonde hair and a white cape appear before him, a sad smile on his face. Who? Don't cry. Little Naruto shook his head. I'm not crying. The figure chuckled a bit, before ruffling his hair. Good boy. Where are we? We're in your mind. But Yukari-san. We have plenty of time. The yellow-haired guy sat down beside him. You've really grown from when I last saw you. Last saw me. Yeah, you were only this big. He gestured a size with his hands, and grinned. I'm glad to see you again. All of a sudden, Naruto realized why this guy had seemed so familiar. Why, you're Yondaime. Yondaime Hokage. Yes, I am. He seemed to smile at his son's recognition of him, but then turned grim as he looked at Naruto. Are you sure you want to go through with this? Naruto looked at him in confusion. What do you mean? Will you trust your Q-chan to save Yukari-san? Of course. Why wouldn't I? Even if it means changing your entire life. Even if it means you might be doomed forever. There's nothing to think. I don't care as long as Yukari-san is alive again. Tears were beginning to form again as he sobbed. It's all my fault. If I had been smarter or stronger, Yukari-san would never have had to save me. He then rubbed his eyes in a rough swipe and glared up at the blonde man. I don't care what you're saying, nor do I give a damn about what is going to happen to me, but I trust Q-chan. Yondaime laughed as he shook his head in exasperation. Yeah, mine all right. Naruto was surprised when the stranger chose to ruffle his head, before whispering, I see now. I guess it's settled. I'm with you all the way. As though something had been settled, the stranger's figure began to slowly fade away. Wait. Where are you going? Haha. Don't fuss. We'll meet again soon enough. Just remember one thing, Naruto. His voice echoed as he disappeared into the darkness. We'll always be a part of you. Eyes widening, Naruto suddenly felt himself expelled from that plane of existence, back into the gray surrounding with Q-chan standing in front of him, arms crossed in expectation. Well, like a star, in my night, you'll always be a part of me. She was right. Yukari-san would always be a part of him, and there was no way in hell that he would just let her go like this. He was the cause of her death. He would be damned if he just let her go. Remember, I love you, Naruto. Yes, no matter the consequence. I swear. Be it my limbs, my organs, or my life. I'll gladly give it up for her. His being shone with a golden aura as he made the oath, a tingling feeling spreading down his spine as he gazed at Q-chan in full confidence. For the first time, in so many years, he heard her voice. It was a melodious one. So granted, my love. A torrent of chakra engulfed the entire area, forming a gigantic tornado of energy as it forced all those near it back, including one completely astonished Sarutobi. There had only been once that he felt such an overwhelming power. It was Kyuubi 6 years ago, its malevolent chakra threatening to destroy anything that dared stand in its way. But this was different. It was soothing, calm, and held such warmth that Sarutobi felt all his worries go away. In the midst of all this, the Konoha citizens and shinobi watched as a fox materialized in the middle of the whirlpool, yipping joyfully, before vanishing altogether with the chakra, leaving an empty spot with Naruto and Yukari nowhere to be seen. The pact had been made. A demon's bond with a human formed. 3 lives interconnected in ways one could never hope to intrude. The search for the lost paradise had begun. I swear. Be it my limbs, my organs, or my life. I'll gladly give it up for her. For the first time, in so many years, he heard her voice. It was a melodious one. So granted, my love. A torrent of chakra engulfed the entire area, forming a gigantic tornado of energy as it forced all those near it back, including one completely astonished Sarutobi. In the midst of all this, the Konoha citizens and shinobi watched as a fox materialized in the middle of the whirlpool, yipping joyfully, before vanishing altogether with the chakra, leaving an empty spot with Naruto and Yukari nowhere to be seen. The pact had been made. A demon's bond with a human formed. 3 lives interconnected in ways one could never hope to intrude. The search for the lost paradise had begun. Lost Paradise. Chapter 2. Birth. Kimi Dako, Suki da Ida yo. It's only you, who I loved. From of Clannad after story. Flashes of light illuminated the area, the surroundings rushing past him in a hurry, like a tape fast-forwarding continuously, the images that formed barely linking to each other before they disappeared once again without a trace. Where am I? Blurs everywhere. Incoherent voices calling out, stringing onto each other, creating layer upon layer, yet for some reason, they do not feel chaotic. In fact, they feel familiar, close, and sometimes, even soothing. What is this? The last thing he could remember was being sucked into some kind of vortex, with flames licking his skin, caressing them in a loving way that he never would have thought possible. It felt like second nature to embrace the element, giving himself to it as he lost consciousness, thinking of it as the requirement Q-chan spoke of. Huh. The whispering grew stronger as his thoughts wandered to the beautiful Kitsune. The background soon sounded hushed, and instead of a mumbling of multiple voices, a select few sounded and certain images flashed before his eyes. Q-chan. A lone Kitsune stood outside of the clan, eyeing them with distaste as it huffed and held its head high. There were few Kitsune that seemed older that held sad expressions on their faces, but nevertheless, they were solemn and serious. As swiftly as it appeared, the scene changed, to one of massacre, the Kitsune tearing through the demons that kept piling up. Even though it put up a brave front and a ferocious fight, Naruto could hear the true voice calling. The desperation and disappointment that no one would recognize her power sounded loud and clear. Even as she plowed through them with ease, her eyes bled tears that should never have been on that lovely face. All she wanted was recognition. Was it that hard for them to accept her? Pain and anguish filled Naruto's heart as he moved deeper through the emotions, hearing the dimmed cries of agony. Even as she withstood countless injuries to attain that level of strength, all the sufferings and misery she had endured to achieve 9 taels of power, and worst of all, the absolute loneliness that came with such a difficult task, she persevered. She had to be strong. She had to become strong. She would show them all. Q-chan. The fury soon changed into uncertainty, Images switched over to a much younger Kitsune Kit. With her tiny soft tail swinging merrily behind her, she stared at the ground, countless thoughts racing through her mind. What am I? Who am I? Simple questions that no one answered, ones that she had to ponder for herself. She had no name, no links to those who gave birth to her, and no understanding of just why she was treated like this. It was such a conflict, where the other Kitsune would do everything to tend to her every need, yet none of them cared what she was doing. They would do something if she asked, but never would they volunteer their help. If anything, they seemed hostile of her. Just why was this so? It was then she came to the conclusion that she would have to find the answers herself, and to one as young as her, the only way to do that would be to be the strongest of the entire clan. That way, they could not hold any information from her. Yes, that was what she would aim for. And happily, she bounced off to plan her route to strength. Somehow, watching her in such high spirits made Naruto feel pain beyond belief. Spears of anxiety thrust through his heart as he realized that the pictures from before showed how Q-chan did not succeed in her goal. For that moment, the reason why the vixen always held such sadness within her gaze became clear in an instant. He would always kiss her when she seemed down, and despite her constant protests to such behavior, she soon gave up and instead, chose to smile softly at his childish attempts to cheer her up. But then again, Naruto was sure that she understood what he was trying to do. To him, it wasn't childish, because he only wanted to see her smile. That was all, and as a child, that was the only thing on his mind that could possibly surprise the lady so much that she would relent and grace him with a lovely smirk. He was jerked out of his reverie when the scene was suddenly engulfed in flames, with mass destruction everywhere. Screaming was heard from the background, and there stood Q-chan, majestic and glorious in her gigantic form, facing off against what would appear to be a gigantic toad, and another figure that stood on top of the toad's head. Against the dark, dim sky, Naruto could just about make out the bright blonde hair. Of course, it was the Yondaime Hokage. At this moment, all he felt from Q-chan was slight misery, combined with extreme frustration. All the stress bottled up had to go somewhere, and Konoha had been there at the wrong time. A few of the other Biju had tried to rebel against her, and as much as she hated to admit it, she was bitter. She resented the fact that there would always be people in her way, always someone to disrupt her course of action just to prove that she was not the best. They didn't care for her reasons of achieving power. As long as it was her, they wouldn't allow it. Simply put, a kitsune with 9 tails was never heard of. In the summon realm, one individual out of 9 particular species would be born with powers way above any of their kin, and they would be identified by the appearance of a tail or tails. Only 9 beings in the entire summon realm could have tails, and they were ranked as such, with 1 being the weakest, and 9 being the strongest. In the ancient times, it would seem that the dragon and the phoenix had both had 9, and fought each other for days on end until both of them perished, for neither would give up. Hence, a demon with 9 tails was practically unheard of for centuries, until Q-chan appeared. Not only was she a kitsune, but she was a mere kid when the 9 tails had sprouted. And there was no way the summon realm would acknowledge such blasphemy. A trickster. With 9 tails. Preposterous. That had been the kind of view most people imprinted her with all her life, and to think that once again, the Biju would defy her, even as she stood at the epitome of her strength. She simply couldn't stand it. Was it so hard to be peaceful? Was it so difficult to let her have some peace? Why must everyone be so damn annoying? She had been stumbling around, negative emotions running wild as she blindly made her way around, exhausted both mentally and physically after the confrontations with the other Biju. And then, it was chaos. She had been dragged into a fight with a shinobi village, one that she had no intention of having at first. But then, she thought with a savage pleasure, that why shouldn't she retaliate? It was time she became selfish and did something that made her happy instead of making everyone else satisfied. And hence she fought, decimated and destroyed any shinobi that stood in her way. Even as she plowed through the puny humans, she couldn't help but feel her heart aching. This wasn't what she wanted, this wasn't helping her at all, yet she could do nothing else. If this was the only release of pain she could have, then yes, she would take it. She would kill them all. Please, just let the pain be gone. I don't care anymore. Naruto's eyes widened as a new voice entered the scene and spinning around, there she was, standing silently, her long red hair flowing off her as she stood before him, eyes half closed, head tilted to the side. So now, you know. You know exactly why I did that 6 years ago. Naruto bit his lips, before sighing, yes, I do. Hugh-chan walked towards him slowly, those mesmerizing crimson orbs choosing to gaze right into his cerulean ones, her emotions hesitantly being reined back as she neared him. So. What is your decision? Naruto blinked, before shaking his head. I'm not following. Hugh-chan continued on, in that melodious voice of hers, I am a demon, a full-fledged kitsune, 9 tails of power in my grasp. I butchered your kind on that very day 6 years ago. Will you still use me? The way her eyes locked onto his, unrelenting, unyielding as she steeled herself, ready for the inevitable answer that would without a doubt shatter her, just like how it always was ever since she was born. No. Though she tried to hide it, her entire being flinched ever so slightly, before she steadily replied, I see, then. I won't use you. Never use you. Hugh-chan. Naruto whispered as he moved forward, arms spreading apart, and to the vixen's immense shock, the blonde embraced her totally and completely. She faltered right then and there, her body melting at his very touch, leaning in willingly into his arms, her head resting under his chin, her face close to his chest, hearing his steady heartbeat, enjoying his warmth. I see now. I understand why Yondaime was there, and what he meant by that. He probably thought I wouldn't be able to handle this sudden change. Naruto chuckled, as he finally took a good look at himself. Gone was the small, frail body of a 6-year-old. In its place was a robust and fit torso, combined with muscular limbs and a much-aged complexion, his hair much wilder than before, spiking out as his palm roamed the back of his head. Feeling the whisker-like marks on his face, he grinned as they seemed rougher and jagged. His mind was enforced with knowledge that he had never had before. It was as though years of experience and information regarding shinobi and the demon world was inserted into his brain just like that. As a 6-year-old, he was possibly one of the most intelligent child in his age group, but now, he felt like he would understand anything, be it a concept for a very complicated ninjutsu, or the specifics of the human body, and as stupid as it sounded, he thought he understood the meaning of his life. He just felt confident, his mind easily adjusting to any new situation, as proven by how smoothly he reacted to that string of memories played to him. He had somehow been forced to grow all within what short time span he had been unconscious. But then again, there really wasn't a way to compare the difference in time in this dimension and the one he was from, seeing how this was a different space realm. Time could be classified as a whole new type of dimension altogether. Over the years, many have argued that time could be the fourth dimension that governs this universe, but now that Naruto was experiencing it himself, he understood. There was no way to classify just how fast it passed by, nor would there be a possibility to predict when it would just end. Humans' perception of it and their ways of setting a way to measure time did not truly define this element. As of now, Uzumaki Naruto was being reborn. To put it simply, for the mere phrase, speeding up growth, did not truly cut it. Not only was Naruto's own potential being brought out at an alarming rate, his body had to cooperate with the sudden efflux of Kyuubi's chakra, and in order to stabilize his being itself, his cell structures had to morph and even carry out mutations to adjust themselves to the demonic tint within the energy that they were now going to be receiving in order to assist their reactions. There was also the other bit. Yondaime Hokage had apparently sunk back into his original seal, and by doing that, had somehow enveloped himself within Naruto's conscious, not as a being, but merely as knowledge and thought processes. That was one of the main reasons why Naruto had suddenly become able to perceive interactions between two different beings with such ease. Had it been his own 6-year-old self, he would simply think that using Q-chan was good, because that would mean saving Yukari-san, and by using Q-chan, he would be closer to the foxy lady as well, so all was good. But the fact remained that the last thing Kyuubi needed right now was for her to be used. To say that she had been living a life for herself would be an outright lie. From the flashes that he witnessed, he had seen the pain and sorrow she had to withstand just by living, and though her reason in attacking Konoha had truly been one that only demons would use, he could not deny the fact that he couldn't find it in himself to fault her. It could be because he was biased, or even because his body had already reacted to the demonic influence, but he really couldn't care less. Q-chan was one of the only two people currently in this world that he would do anything for, just to ensure that she remained happy. Laying down his life for her didn't even begin to show just how much he cared for her. Care received as a child always goes a long way, and because Q-chan had been there throughout all those nights, teaching him, educating him, and generally being a wonderful presence in his life, that he couldn't bear to see her hurt at all. Knowledge of the shinobi world and even his father's way of thinking had been incorporated into his essence, and hence, the reason that his father had met him that way was resolved. No longer would the two of them ever see each other, but to feel you truly having a part of your father within you made him really warm on the inside. Finally, he could say that he had known someone related to him by blood. As an orphan, that really meant a lot to him. The knowledge was a good present, but to understand what your father had been through while he was holding his son after he was born, and just to catch a glimpse of how his mother actually looked like and how her loving gaze had lingered on him all the while made it all the more worthwhile to carry on his burden. He could now face life right on and not have any doubts that he wasn't loved. The mental support that he had gained from this simple action would be enough to power him just as it had powered his father to attempt the supposed impossible feat. Sealing a biju properly was thought to be impossible. In the past, soon as one-tailed Jinchuriki had always been either insane or completely devoid of self-will, mindless machines that did not comprehend anything else other than to kill, maim and destroy. The sealing was the reason. Unequal formulas and incorrect interpretations of the nature of chakra led to leakage within the seal, causing the demonic influence to not only interfere with the human's thought process, but to overwhelm it, destroy it and replace it with nothing but simple bloodlust, a magnification of what the biju was feeling because of its imprisonment. When Minato suggested sealing Kyuubi, everyone thought he was insane, Yondaime or not. The chances that the seal would fail were too high and the backlash that would result from that failure might detonate Konoha right on the spot. Half of the council members wanted to evacuate the village and start off anew elsewhere, seeing no other choice before the might of the strongest biju on this planet, Kyuubi. Given his prowess in Fuinjutsu and his excellent theory overall on the manipulation, control and basically the understanding of chakra was superb, Sandaime had eventually agreed and let him carry on his project of the Hake Fuin Shiki. The question was always the same in these cases. Who was to be the container? The choices were limited and though multiple names were put forth, none of them were actually considered. Minato himself rejected them all, for the simple reason that his sealing did not work like others and could not have an adult as a container. The biju would be forced to aid the container with its growth, unlike the other Jinchuriki in the world, where the biju actively resisted the container's influence and did whatever it wanted. Rumors were that you had to either merge completely with your biju for it to even consider what you want, and that situation was something Minato could not have. No, the biju would listen, whether it liked it or not. Then, there came the problem of a sacrifice. Well, that bit was simple. He himself would be it. After all, the sacrifice had to be in complete sync with him in terms of chakra flow, regulation of the 4 aspects of nature, focus of the 8 divinations and all sorts of other stuff. The simplest solution would be to let his own essence be used up for this, and that was what he went with. The day had finally arrived where Kyuubi attacked them. It had seemed to shy away from them at first, but then rushed at them with a vengeance. The menacing anger emanated from its chakra could be felt miles away and the whole of Konoha was on guard. It was also the day Kushina gave birth to Naruto. Minato did all that he could and tried to hold Kyuubi at bay. He had no choice. The possibility that he came up with was thrown right out of the window. Sealing such an enormous chakra capacity within himself and taking it to death with him was pretty much impossible. At best, he could take about 4 tails worth before his body exploded from the sheer pressure. He wouldn't be able to finish the sequence and well, 5 tails were pretty much all it needed to crush Konoha anyway. Regrettably, he sighed, knowing that he had no other choice. He had to use an infant. The irony. Contrary to popular belief, Fuinjutsu wasn't just insanely hard. It was completely infuriating. One would question just why using an infant would succeed where the Yondaime Hokage, one well known for his chakra capacity and control, would fail. Apparently, an infant would not attempt to absorb any of the chakra during the sealing process. There would be no influx of demonic aura at all when it comes to an infant. When born, at their most vulnerable states, it would appear that nature gave them the most powerful weapon of all. The ability to take in no exterior essence, retaining but her own life force, and keeping it that way as it matures. What was essence? Humans have souls. Souls could be good or bad, like the cliché stories told in ancient tales. They will be influenced at some point in life, but never right after birth. The souls of infants remain intact, for the brains of the infants would not yet be developed to the extent for it to comprehend the exterior forces working on it, and hence would be treated as a passive state by any other essences that revolve around it. Hence, conclusion was drawn by sealing masters that every single person had a unique essence, much related to chakra and their own life force. It flares like an invisible aura around the person, and through actions, the intent of the people performing the actions amplify the essence, mingling them with other people so that each of them get benefits. Take for example, a man helping an old lady. Anyone seeing this would assume that the man is kind. Why is that? Sealing masters argue that this is not merely using common sense of knowledge, but actually the essence of a person interfering with theirs, transferring the intent of the man's actions to the others around him, and in such a way, show that he is kind. Minato had turned that theory, and hence reasoned that because an infant would be intact from exterior essences, sealing Kyuubi within it would cause none of the pressure expected, due to the fact that any killing intent or anger would have absolutely no effect on the ignorant baby. Sealing it within him, such a marvelous genius of chakra, would combust him on the spot. The more in control of your chakra, the more essence affected you, the more in understanding of chakra, the more essence influenced you. That complicated bit done with, Minato was faced with the shaking face of one Uzumaki Kushina. Every time Minato went into one of those trances where he would just stare at something with his eyes wide open, she felt like slapping him out of it. The fact that he was staring at their baby made it all the creepier. Knowing him, he was probably going to do something drastic like sacrifice their baby or something. No, she didn't think that. No, he wouldn't that. He better not do that. And it was then where Minato snapped out of it and quickly outlined his plan to her. Staring at her husband as if he was insane, she raised an eyebrow and shot down that idea in an instant. What a retard. How could he even possibly think that sealing a freaking chakra entity within their baby after he killed himself to maintain a link between said entity and infant could possibly solve anything? Okay, so she was hyperventilating, but who cared? Did this idiot even realize that there would be no way that the link could even be maintained for that long? He would obviously need a catalyst of some sort so that their baby would survive. What was he thinking going into this alone? Did he not have brains or something? Some genius he was. Apparently, she had said those thoughts out loud, and looking at the horrified expressions on her husband's face, she couldn't help but sigh in amusement. Minato's worst fears were confirmed when Kushina declared that she would be the catalyst. What was with this woman? Did she not understand that she had to die and that he didn't want her to die? Was it so hard to comprehend the fact he was going to die so that she didn't have to? Women. Too damn troublesome. Watching this memory, Naruto couldn't help but laugh. This was what his parents were doing right when the mighty Kyuubi was at their doorsteps. Beside him, Hyu-chan shook her head in exasperation. Naruto was their son all right. No wonder he had dared kiss her when he first met her. She just knew that he wasn't right in the head. Now there was proof. His parents weren't either. Somehow, Naruto thought that he should have felt hurt that his parents decided to use him without a single protest. He should have been disappointed in their willingness to try out this seemingly insane project. But he didn't. Quite the contrary, he felt pleased and proud. His father chose him to seal one of the legendary beasts, because Minato trusted him. His mother chose to sacrifice herself so that he didn't get damaged by the backlash that was bound to occur from this gigantic sealing process. They weren't the kind to lament on the past, nor were they the kind to yearn for the future. What mattered was the simple present. And to the both of them, they knew what had to be done. Kushina and Minato had been together during the sealing. Naruto saw how they had both cradled their baby with the utmost care and shielded him from most of the chakra waves that were splashing onto the area around them. Kushina had placed a kiss on his cheek, before she forced her own chakra around him, layering it so that it would not penetrate and the sealing would proceed without complications. Minato's last words to him were a simple, be good. Not, be strong. Not, be safe. But, be good. Naruto understood now that his father had no doubts that he would be strong and safe. Konoha was his village, and he ruled it for a time, to understand that while there would be prejudices, overall, Naruto wouldn't be too bad off. Besides, he was his son, so he could just suck it up as he grew up. Life wasn't fair, it never will be, and that was a precious lesson to be learned. At this moment, Naruto fully understood what Minato meant by, be good. He wanted his son to enjoy his life, to do what he wanted and to help others get what they wanted too. Normally, Naruto would say that was impossible, because being a good person would be insanely difficult in the world of shinobi. But then again, he was never the cliché ninja to begin with, especially not after the confrontation with Q-chan moments ago. He would be good. Oh yes, that he would be. No more pain, no more sorrow, no more wars. That's a pretty good thing to make happen, right? Sure, it wouldn't be 100%, but hey, 75% would be pretty sweet. Q-chan was currently staring at him with the most bemused expression, and he could help but caress her face as he chuckled. Don't mind me, Dad's essences, interfering, as we speak. Groaning at the fact that he was already into those stupid seal theory stuff, she resisted a snort and sighed, how can you be so amused all the time? She crossed her arms across her bosom and shrugged in an exasperated manner. Shouldn't any other normal being be extremely upset and distraught that their parents would just decide to kill themselves and place a huge burden on their just-born son? Her eyes dimmed slightly at the mention of burden. Don't you regret being born? Silence reigned in the void as Kyuubi closed her eyes, remembering her own past and how she simply could not deal with the pain and sorrow in her life anymore. Not being acknowledged and always shunned had made her accept the harsh realities present in her own realm. She was shaken out of her reverie when a hand gently stroked her cheek, sliding smoothly along her skin before resting below her chin, lifting it lightly as her crimson orbs gazed into cerulean blue. I don't regret it. His words rang loud in her ears as her eyes widened ever so slightly, the expression of disbelief written over her face as she stared at the boy, no, man in front of her. Tilting his head slightly, he bent down, lips hovering just over hers, his gaze never broken as he grinned. If I weren't born, then how would I have met you, Q-chan? The soft hush of his voice drew Kyuubi in, the air blowing lightly over her lips, enticing her, alluring her, drawing her to him. Subconsciously, she leaned forward, searching for his lips, only for him to pull back just an inch or so, just out of reach. This continued for a few more seconds, before Naruto finally planted a deep kiss on her mouth, savoring her taste as he pulled her into a warm embrace. Almost losing herself completely to his love, Kyuubi barely managed to pull away, her breath slightly rushed as her gaze lingered on the smirking blonde before her. Everything he did to her felt so natural, her instincts understanding his every move perfectly, and right now, she wanted nothing more than to melt into his arms, and stay forever in this sanctuary. It was extremely unbecoming for a demon lord, a Kitsune demon lord especially, to even consider such an option. She was supposed to be the best, the strongest and the mightiest entity of them all, and yet. Naruto brushed his fingers through her hair and chuckled, what's wrong, Q-chan? Feeling guilty after taking a jailbait. That brought her out of the reverie as she raised an eyebrow, remembering the bold, unpredictable and mischievous 6-year-old, yet in its place stood someone enough to be considered a young adult. Very funny, Uzumaki. Swatting his hand away, she regained her composure, deciding to think about this development at a later time. After all, she had a promise to carry out. Naruto simply laughed, before focusing, will you be alright by yourself? Kyuubi huffed before shaking her head, I'm not as frail as I look. The grown-up blonde walked behind her, tracing his fingers gently up her spine, sending delightful shivers through her body, before finally resting on her shoulder, his face rubbing her cheek in an affectionate manner, just like how he did it when he was a child. No, but you're just as precious. Kyuubi barely resisted a purr at the comment, before unwillingly detaching herself from him. I'll be fine. You just take care of your Yukari-san. Her tone held a teasing note, wouldn't want her to be freaked out by you now, would we? Naruto sighed, to be honest, I should be freaked out, if anything. He rotated his neck once, letting an audible crack echo through the area, before nodding, but nah, I'm just not like that. The redhead looked at him for a short while, before smiling, I'm glad you're my vessel. The blonde started for a bit, before laughing and replying in a cheeky tone, "Ah, I'm always here to serve." Scowling, Kyuubi playfully slapped him on the head before wrapping her tails around her and disappearing from the void. Naruto stared at the spot for a few moments, before sighing, "Talk about raging hormones. Least I don't have to worry about puberty anymore." Rolling his eyes at the randomness of that particular thought, he quickly brought himself back to focus. Yukari-san was still waiting for him. Yes, she would definitely still be there. There were quite a few problems, however. Just what would she say about this new him? Normal people don't just zoom from 6-year-old to the body of a 20-year-old in a day or two, nor do they suddenly gain vast amounts of knowledge of about pretty much everything, ranging from shinobi matters to the most personal matters such as 99 different positions of making love. Yes, 99. Apparently his parents got bored and started experimenting, but seriously, that piece of information could be done without. It just so happened that he had to inherit all his father's knowledge, unable to filter out stuff. Well, at least he still retained himself, and he should probably be glad that he didn't have his father constantly nagging about stuff like a third voice or something in his head. That would seriously be screwed up. Kyuubi's knowledge aided him as well, and perhaps that was why he knew instantly just what the vixen craved, what she needed, and what he needed to do to complete her. He was no longer naive. The pact had been formed. He would always be one with her, and together, they would accomplish great things that no one had ever dared dream of. Maybe venturing into the god's realm wouldn't be too difficult after they were done with the human one. He loved her. Ever since he was a boy, he had loved her. To Naruto, there really wasn't that much difference in the way he loved. He hadn't the opportunity to show brotherly love, or lover love, or whatever. If he loved with his heart. As far as he was concerned, he had only felt that way for two. He would save them both, Kyu-chan from her abyss, Yukari-san from her hell. Alright, enough thoughts. Let's do this. For the first time since his forced growth, Naruto reached into his core, and silently searched for the power that lay within. It wasn't long before his eyes flashed open, a flare of the purest white engulfing his entire being. Bracing himself, he held his hands before him, before plunging them into the air. Slowly but surely, he could feel it. The space and time dimensions were getting distorted by his external interruption. Come on. Pulling his arms apart, it was quite the impressive sight as a rift was dragged open before him. Here goes nothing. Diving in head first, he rushed into his destination. Oh yes, he knew where he had to go. He had been under the impression that he had been in his mind all along, and yet that proved to be untrue the moment he reached out with his chakra. Conversing with Kyu-chan only served to prove his theories true, that they were indeed in the fine line of void that separated the living and the dead. It wasn't all that surprising. Accepting Kyu-chan's vast chakra by absorbing it into his body while at the same time, letting the shadow of his father activate all the hidden potential within him had at least a 50% chance that he would be killed. Musing that Kyu-chan probably brought them there so that if he did die, she would rush in to save him herself, Naruto couldn't help but shake his head at the vixen's affection. Well, it was a pact, and there was no way that could be broken. Right now, all that was left would be for him to save Yukari, once and for all. First, the soul, and then, the body. Ready or not, Yukari-san, here I come. Penetrating the barriers with ease, he arrived in an entirely different setting, landing gracefully onto the ground as he eyed his surroundings with caution. Unlike what people normally thought, the realm of the dead was not filled with desert-like crevasses, nor was it endless plains portraying the perfect picture of tranquility. The realm of the dead was essentially different to every single person, interconnected only if the souls had truly accepted their deaths and chose to move on. The scene that any dead being would have within this dimension would be the one and only place that they could feel truly at peace in. That being said, he was currently in Yukari-san's death realm, and right before his eyes was the very orphanage that he had spent 6 years with her. He could just feel her presence within the matron's room, emotions echoing off the walls as he walked into the building. Every step he took, he braced himself for the inevitable outcome of this intrusion. It just wouldn't do for him to get interrupted while he attempted to rescue a dead person now, would it? Oh, apparently, bringing someone back to life was forbidden. Nah, he didn't care. Finally reaching the designated room, He took a deep breath, before pushing it open, seeing before his eyes a perfectly intact Yukari-san holding a photo frame to her chest, weeping. For that moment, Naruto couldn't speak. The vivid image of how Yukari-san had died in his arms was too horrifying for him to forget anytime soon. His lips parted slightly, his breath caught in his throat. His hands reached out, before halting, merely wanting to continue seeing this woman before him, not wanting her to fade away like she did before. On an impulse, he rushed forward and scooped her into his arms in one swift motion, embracing her like he always did, with all his love and care, with all his warmth and tenderness. Her gasp followed by a confused gaze at his face stopped him temporarily in his tracks, making him curse himself for not telling her who he was. Yet, the way her hand slowly rose to cup his cheek, squeezing it once before stroking those whisker marks of his, how her eyes became half closed, a sigh left her lips followed by a bemused sentence, "It looks like I really do miss him too much, but humor me." With a slightly raised eyebrow, she gave a sad smile before whispering, "Naruto." Eyes widened. Naruto barely resisted the urge to gape and instead, let loose a gigantic grin, one that threatened to split his face as he gave a huge nod, "Yep." Chuckling, Yukari-san simply shook her head, "I wish." Her gaze was so longing, her caress so soothing, and yet the melancholy lingered. "It's okay. I understand. I did what I had to. All I could ask for would be for him to lead a happy life." Closing her eyes, she lightly pushed the blonde back, before bowing, "Whoever you are, I thank you for letting me see this dream. I guess now's a good time for me to accept my fate." Even as she said it, her body began to glow, and slowly, her hands began to become transparent. An eerie aura slowly surrounded her body as she stood there, waiting for all this to end. Goodbye, Naruto. She had a good life. Even if she couldn't forget the horrors of the Anbu, she still made herself useful for her village and for the later part of her life, had Naruto redeem her. She was completed by the blonde and would never forget about him. One moment she was disappearing, the next, her eyes were wide open, disbelief etched all over her face as she watched the blonde place his lips onto hers, his tongue entangling with hers, kissing her as she lay limp in his arms. What the? Man, that was close. Huh, you really do scare me at times, Yukari-san. Wait, what? I'm guessing saying I'm Naruto again wouldn't do any good in making you believe me. No, seriously, what? You do realize I can sorta tell what you're thinking right now by the expression on your face, right? This has to be some kind of a joke. Well, as much as I like to hang around, I believe it's time to get you out of here. Wouldn't want you to move on. Now, would we? What the hell? Naruto, on the other hand, had to pat himself on the back for daring to attempt such a move. But then again, ever since he was young, he knew that kissing someone would be the best way to get a person's attention, and well, he definitely needed to get her attention just now, or else she would have ascended into heaven, and that would just make things 10 times more difficult. Or maybe 100 times, but who cares? This was the borderline to the death realm, and obviously, for someone to truly move on, there had to be some sort of collector of souls, right? At least, that's what Naruto had gathered from the information Kyuubi gave him. And that was quite a lot of information, considering how the vixen had lived for quite some time. One did not count the number of years in the summon realm the same way you do with the human realm. It just didn't work that way. Carrying her bridal style in his arms, Naruto dashed out of the house. Meaning, he had to crash through the windows at top speed before the entire place collapsed. Now, why was the place collapsing? Yukari could only stare wide-eyed at the rubble that was the orphanage before. What the? You better have a good explanation for this. Naruto smiled grimly. Oh, but I do. Then again, let's do the talking later. The ex-kunoichi was about to retort when she noticed the entire area shaking vigorously, with multiple cracks appearing on the ground. Gulping as landslides began to form, she gave a meek nod, "Good decision." Laughing loudly, the blonde's eyes glowed gold, "I knew you'll see it my way." In a burst of speed, they were off. Yukari could only feel a sudden slam of wind currents into her being that was somewhat shielded by the blonde carrying her, before her mind reeled from the velocity they were traveling at. She was a kunoichi before, and to say she traveled fast was an understatement, but this was ridiculous. This wasn't running at all, this was just pure speed. Barely able to turn her head, she gasped in surprise when she realized that the ground that used to be behind them was now falling off. Wait a minute, falling off. It was then realization hit her. The black abyss that appeared in place of what used to be soothing imagery really hit her hard. Would I have been stuck in there? The moment you accepted your death, it signified the end to this realm. There was no need for it to exist anymore, for you have embraced your death, and that's why we're gonna escape. As fast as they were moving, the destruction of path was quickly gaining on them, and it would seem that the road before them was endless. In fact, where were they going? Yukari stared at the blonde, wondering just what else was going to happen. Imagine her shock when the supposed Naruto simply smirked. Time to shift gears. Flames erupted off his body, eliciting a yelp of surprise from the female in his arms, making his smirk all the more wider. This was the first time he reached in to tap his potential, and to feel all that lukewarm energy flowing freely through your veins before suddenly light up and heat up your entire being was one of the best things he could have experienced. Whoa, what is this? Some kind of booster? Yukari spent but a second to admire the incredible gush of winds that were rushing past them, generated by the sheer velocity at which they were traveling, before she realized something. Wait, why are we above the ground? It was then where her entire being was in for another shock. What the hell? Sit tight, Yukari-san, flight's about to get real rough. Huh, whoa. With the blonde suddenly swerving to the left, a huge blast of dark energy surged past them, taking out an entire chunk of the forest around them. It was extremely unnerving to see that all it did was erase any evidence that there was even such an image to begin with. No explosions, no booms, just good old simple nothing. Pun could be intended, but Yukari wasn't focusing on that right now. It was the fact that human-shaped, well, if that could even be called a human, monsters were trailing after them, spears in hand and whatnot, acting perfectly to fit the role of demons as they chased after something. Of course, anyone with a common sense would be able to tell what they were after, dead person or not. Why the heck are they behind us? Her voice was bordering on the high-pitched side, showing just how she was completely unable to grasp the string of events that had occurred to her. No matter how you looked at it, it was just too weird to be true. She was dead. Dead. Dead meaning not seeing stuff, not hearing stuff, not breathing. Musing that she wasn't technically breathing because she didn't think that hell had oxygen, but before she digressed, she focused on the fact that she was experiencing a lot of things that shouldn't be possible for someone as dead as she was. Utterly ridiculous. Impossible. Right. Wrong. Taking yet another sharp turn, Naruto gritted his teeth, should have known nothing goes right. Hell spawn Alright. In a flash, a second blonde appeared next to them, phasing into existence as Naruto handed the woman in his arms to the copy. Here. Wait, what? What is that? Expecting to simply fall because logic informed her that this doppelganger had seemingly just appeared out of nowhere, from no substance at all, meaning that if she were to be handed to a mere shadow, the most likely result would be for her to simply fall flat on her butt after falling through this endless abyss, if there was something for her to fall on, that is. Imagine her surprise when she felt the exact same flesh interacting with her skin as she was whisked away. Staring up at blonde number 2, or so she had dubbed the doppelganger, she was met with a grin. Don't mind me. I don't really exist. Easy for you to say. You aren't the one that's getting all confused and all that. Since we now have some time, let's start the knowledge transfer. The what? Her answer was given in the form of the Naruto holding her, slowly melting into her body. The feeling was an unreal sensation, as though a warm watery substance was lathered all over her body, before seeping in, bit by bit, feeling her up, making her whole. And all this time, her body had continued to travel at the same speed, despite the fact that no blonde was holding her. Slowly, bits of the information regarding her death, what happened afterwards, and most importantly, memories of the blonde, or should she say, Naruto, all combined together to help her gain a new understanding as to just what was happening. This realm was supposed to be hers only because of imagination, a place linking to true and eventual death only to allow her a few moments of peace before her moving on. Naruto came to save her. Naruto was alive. Naruto was alive. Yes, he is. You idiotic mortal. Huh. Another being appeared beside her, arms crossed as her tails swirled around them both, enveloping their existence as a gap began to form in the area ahead, much like the one Naruto had ripped before he had plunged into this abyss. No way. The redhead vixen simply closed her eyes as she reached into her powers, and with a demonic roar, they were both engulfed in a pyre of flames, and with that, they escaped Yukari's death realm. Naruto, after sending out a mere after-image of himself, holding it together using demonic energy, and conveniently, he fused the knowledge of the events that led him to his current action into the afterimage. Using that in an extra burst of speed, he was able to convince Yukari-san that the afterimage was still solid. He had been a bit worried about that particular execution, unsure if that would really work, but given the fact that he could no longer sense the presence of Yukari-san or Q-chan within this void, he assumed they were both safe now. Eyeing the hell spawn on his tail in disgust, Naruto simply grunted, "Show's over." Halting, the blonde raised a single hand as flames soared into his palm. Oh yes. Even the monsters could feel the gathering of a huge source of energy and slowed down their pace, muttering to each other in a language incomprehensible to Naruto, but really, that didn't matter. Yuan. Flames of the sun, surging white blazes swirled around each other to form a huge sphere vibrating with energy as Naruto held it within his hand. The hell spawns could only watch on in fear as they witnessed the power before them, causing them to shake on their spots as Naruto whispered, "Good morning, and good day." A gigantic explosion erupted throughout the entire void, blasting anything that stood in its way as it crashed through the ranks, taking with it all the hell spawns, sucking them in due to the cohesion of chakra and the attractive forces of the heat, drawing them close, burning them, destroying them. Shrieks of pain weren't heard as their end came too quick. One by one they were eliminated, and the resulting detonation was all Naruto needed to rip a new space-time distortion and escape. The Shinigami might not be too happy that its underlings were wiped out that easily, but then again, they were quite stupid ones, so Naruto was sure he wouldn't mind. With a smirk on his face, he greeted a somewhat flustered Yukari-san and an amused Q-chan, "Yo." The vixen simply chuckled, "You do realize that Shinigami Yaro ain't gonna be happy with that last stunt you pulled." Shrugging, he mused, "Well, maybe he should understand that I'm not too happy with him either." Kyuubi laughed, My, aren't we the confident one?" Naruto simply shook his head, before turning to Yukari-san, "I believe Q-cha has." Yukari could only nod as she sorted through the information transferred to her mind. She was now technically a wandering soul, without a chance to move on, as they called it, free to do what she wanted and finally, free to live again. As Kyuubi had stated, there was only one problem, and that was the fact that she didn't have a body. Subconsciously, a thought entered her mind that even if she took up her original body, it wouldn't work considering how she had been mortally injured, and contrary to popular belief, when a soul re-enters said body, the injuries do not just magically disappear. A soul with a dead body would only lead to the rotting and eventual decomposition of the soul. And that was a fate quite worse than death. Then again, without a body, she wasn't able to do anything. Without a physical link, she couldn't experience anything and therefore, living, wouldn't be of much use either. "So, do you want to give it a go?" Kyuubi whispered as she placed her arms around her waist. "I believe it would be quite worthwhile to try considering how you and I would be one." In order for her original body to heal, Kyuubi had offered to merge with her body, using the demonic powers of her soul to morph her human body into something more befitting of her status. That way, a body holding two souls would be possible, seeing how normally, a body would simply disintegrate, seeing how it wouldn't be able to contain two souls at once. The merging, so as to speak, wasn't a complete one, merely sharing each other's conscious, acting as one person on the outside, two on the inside. Yukari took one look at Naruto, before smiling, "You know, I would never have expected that little boy to grow up into the man standing before me." Turning to Kyuubi who was leaning against her, she bowed slightly, "I thank you for being there for him as well." The redhead chuckled, "Oh no need. I was quite infuriated with his presence every night, bothering me to teach him stuff." "Oh, he does that to you too?" "Indeed, he does. Hence the reason why I've decided to save myself the trouble and dump my knowledge on him in one go. One of the upsides of transferring chakra." Haha, I see." Resisting the urge to blush, remembering the more naive times of his childhood, Naruto scratched the back of his head, before deadpanning, "What's that got to do with anything?" Yukari raised her hand and caressed Naruto's cheek. You silly boy, I know everything now. How you felt for me, what you did for me, and just how big a price you paid to bring me back to life. Naruto grimaced, before glaring at Q-chan in a reproachful manner. You didn't have to tell her that. It was then where both females stood in front of him, gazing into his eyes as they pulled him into an embrace. This action surprised Naruto, but their words silenced whatever protest he was going to give. Uzumaki Naruto, you accepted me, embraced me, and loved me for who I am. For that, you gave up on any chance of entering heaven. Q-chan whispered, her fingers tracing his whiskers. You associate yourself with a demon like me, even offering your bare soul to me, choosing to trust me when others have doubted me. It's only you, and only ever be you, that I love. Diving in there to save me, you baka, hell too closed their doors to you. Shinigami-sama would never allow you in trance after that stunt you pulled. Her eyes were smiling as she nuzzled his cheek. To think you really did become my knight and protect me. I understand now, your thoughts, your actions, and how you had given up any chance of a normal life just to be with me. Kyuubi showed me everything. Naruto closed his eyes and sighed. I'm sorry. I was too naive. I thought everything would be alright as long as you guys were with me, and that life would simply go on as it should. He shook his head. When you died, I didn't know what to do at all. I failed in my promise to protect you, and all that was on my mind was how to get you back, right here, by my side. Cerulean Blue met Amber as he whispered, I'm sorry. Yukari simply placed her head on his chest, seeing how he was now notably taller than she was, and replied, it's okay. You're here for me now, and that's all that I need to know. You were but a boy then, blissfully ignorant of the horrors of this world, and I, who couldn't stand seeing any more needless bloodshed, chose to use you as my sanctuary. You were my hope and light, that this world could still be changed. It's only you, and can only be you, Naruto, that I love. Both females then took a step back, before linking their arms together, a fiery red engulfing their presence as Naruto smiled gratefully. I'll learn, I'll get stronger, and I'll avenge the unjust raised on the both of you. I will be your pillar of strength, just like you were my havens. I love you, and only you. Yes, only you, it's only you that I love. In a spiral of blazes, Yukari and Kyuubi both felt their essence leave their bodies, slowly revolving, gradually fusing with each other, before they phased out of the realm. There was no doubt where their combined essence were heading for, and Naruto, after one last look at the area around him, smiled and whispered, thank you for this gift, father. Kimi to Boku no Kokura no Tsunejitaru no wa. The thing that connects your heart to mine is, from running on in Basquash. A mingling of essence, a combination of souls, a mixing of different races. Never before had Naruto witnessed such a thing of beauty. The very theory of a demon merging with a human soul screamed one word, pain. Yet here they were, Yukari-san and Q-chan, gracefully pouring their energy into one another, and then together, into the body that used to belong to Yukari-san. It was a sight to behold. Brilliance of colors and descriptive words did no justice as Vixen and Soul set aside their differences, choosing instead to focus on the one person both of them pledged the rest of their lives to. Naruto. Cuts and wounds on the body disappeared, and slowly, it was engulfed in a blur of light, rising off the ground to meet its owners. Simple nods of understanding along with twin smiles were all it took before the merge was set onto its final stages. Hugh-chan stretched out her palm, slowly clenching it into a fist before turning it upside down and reopening, letting loose a stream of crimson, while Yukari-san did the exact opposite, showering the body with a cloud of violet. The catalysts were placed, and now all it took was for them to take the plunge. In a vibrant dash of fireworks, the chakra and demonic energy involved clashed with one another, as though challenging each other to see who was superior in this realm of nature, yet even as the two of them sunk their souls within the body, the snarling red turned to alluring scarlet, while violent purple changed to soothing violet, signifying complete agreement in the balance that was to be established between them both from now on. Naruto held his breath as the aura around the body slowly faded, revealing a slim, feminine figure, pale skin enveloping her all the way to the head, where streaks of red and white hair flowed. Landing on her feet, her arms spread to the side, mimicking the descent of a celestial being, Naruto couldn't help but admire the sheer beauty and elegance she possessed. Supple flesh gathered around her chests, accentuating her attractive bosom, along with lithe muscles on her abdomen, before the soft tissue continued downwards to her hips, leading to gorgeous legs and a pair of lovely feet. It was then that she opened her eyes, scarlet and golden, gazed at him steadily, lips slowly curving into a tempting smile, mouth widening to show rows of white teeth, tongue poking out to lick the edges of sultry lips. Raising her hand to touch said tongue, her fingers were nimble and slim, stylish and refined as she dragged a thin line of saliva down her bosom to her sacred region. No words were spoken, yet thousands of hints had been placed, and all it took was for someone to react before sparks began. Naruto did not resist the temptation, and simply strode forward, grabbed her by the shoulders, pulling her into his arms in a swift motion and crashed his lips onto hers, his hand cupping her fondly as the other reached for her inviting flesh. Moans of pleasure and lust filled the air, and it wasn't until a few minutes later, when Naruto finally parted from the enthralling kiss, did he speak, "You're beautiful." Hissing slightly, the female once again searched for his lips and sucked on them, before continuing where they left off. Whispering, her light breath brushed over his skin, eliciting shivers down his spine. The urge to mate is just so strong. I can't wait. Her left hand traveled south, exploring and finding the target, stroking and brushing against it as she murmured, "Now." Barely finding it in him to resist, Naruto captured her lips one last time, earning himself another jolt of pleasure as she melted into his arms again. Letting her go, he turned her around, nipping her ear lobes as he whispered, sending shivers across her skin, "I'd love to, but are you both in agreement? Or is this just Q-chan wanting some fun?" The scarlet eye on the right side glinted slightly, before the mouth turned into a pout. "Just because I was a vixen, golden shined this time, why do you assume I'm a quiet little girl?" The voice before had been slightly deeper and luxurious, potent and tempting, whereas the latter was more soothing and calm. Naruto didn't speak, his hands continuing their previous activities, fingers finding the tip of her as they lightly squeezed, pulled and rolled. Gasps of pleasure left her mouth as she searched for his lips, wanting to taste him once again. The need and want was twice as much considering how there were two of them, and since there was only one body to experience, the pleasure was insatiable. Patience. Touching the small nub of nerves, he flicked it gently, swirling his finger around it, before pressing down, all the while, his teeth nibbled affectionately down her neck, ending with soft kisses on her shoulders. "You tease." The female that had seemed so wholly simply moments ago had one arm laced around his head, pulling him close to her, feeling his warmth and strength while she grinded her hips back into his, not wanting to be the only one on the receiving end of the game. Not missing a beat, Naruto then probed lightly, parting the welcoming flesh as he entered, one, then two fingers. The rhythmic pulsing along with the warm heat prompted him to add yet another one, stroking her insides at a slow pace, gradually picking up pace. Her breath quickened, every single pore in her body became sensitive to all the sensations that assaulted her brain from the overwhelming ecstasy. The lust that filled her to the brim was being lured out, slowly reaching the climax as she was loved by the one that would soon become her mate. "Open your eyes, and look at me." His soft words echoed in her mind, causing her to obey without question, basking in the glorious pleasure that she was being administered. Then and there she came, muscles clenching down on those fingers, her voice high and loud as she screamed her release, streams of liquid dripping down her legs as she leaned back into him, enjoying the aftermath of a mind-blowing orgasm. However, she didn't seem to be fazed, and once again, met his lips, this time softly and slowly, unlike the urge and rush she had shown before. Naruto turned her back around, eyebrow raised as he ventured, "Yukari-san." Light was then followed by sultry, she insisted. "Quite a handful, aren't you both?" Naruto mused, before smiling, "Are you sure, Kazumi?" The female blinked, before closing her eyes and thinking for a bit, and then nodding, "Kazumi, huh? I like it." Kazumi, a name intended to portray her beauty in literature, showing off her pure elegance and grace, and yet at the same time, a playful and light-hearted name, symbolizing the harmonious nature of their combined personality. "Glad to hear that." Her eyes met his, and with a firm nod, she continued, "Take me, love me, mark me." The blonde responded in turn, sliding the length of him across her, tantalizing her, "Yes, my love." Her moans and slight gasps were followed by occasional sighs as Naruto lay down on the ground, pulling her to him, feeling her straddle him as she lowered her entire self onto his shaft, slowly enveloping him bit by bit, all the way to the bottom, filling her up to the brim. Stretching herself completely, with her legs spread wide by his sides, her torso bent forwards, until her met his chest. Never shall we part. We'll always be one. Together. Her lips placed a light kiss above his heart, before slowly rising, releasing him inch by inch, white energy surrounding her as she let him go temporarily. Naruto closed his eyes, reaching for his chakra core, and acknowledging the pact that was made to his heart. He rose to meet her sitting up and placing a firm kiss at the spot just above the valley between her bosom. He pulled her down, her wet folds parting as he penetrated her, a moan escaping her lips as he kissed her. Your heart to mine, connected forever, we shall never part. Crimson chakra rose and blended with the white, and in the sphere of energy, Kazumi and Naruto sealed their pact with the most ancient form of bond. Through the ways of procreation, they have proven their absolute love and care for one another, and nature had recognized them officially as a couple and accepted them both with opening arms. Amidst the cries of ecstasy as they engaged in the love-making session, the energy slowly seeped back within them, the wind rustling softly as the process was completed. Naruto grunted, and as Kazumi slammed herself down one final time, they were both sent into the state of bliss and nirvana, sweat glistening off their bodies as they hugged each other close, enjoying the shivers of pleasure that rushed across them. To think that it was only your first time. Incredible, Kazumi breathed, her entire being lazy, liking how her body was draped across his so easily. Naruto chuckled. I'm good at exploring, is all. Having finally left the realm of space as Yukari and Kyuubi merged, the energy created due to the process assaulted their senses in ways that were primal. Even as their souls entered the body, their love for Naruto was converted into the basic emotion known to a feral being, lust. The need to mate came from the temporary instability of their essences, and seeing how Kyuubi came from Naruto's body, and Yukari had strong affections for Naruto, the link was established and nature's instincts deemed it necessary that Kazumi, the new being that arose from the merge, mate with the one and only man for her. Kazumi needed an attachment to this world. The newly morphed body with erratic feelings running everywhere had to settle down. Naruto was the only solution. Had they not committed to each other, and carried out the pact, Kazumi would have eventually exploded due to the energy within her, unable to be released. By forming lifelong pact with her mate, the process shaved off a huge bulk of that energy, and that final burst of ecstasy served as the release for the remaining chakra. Part of that chakra was returned to nature, as a symbol of goodwill, thanking her for accepting them. The rest was divided equally and split between them both, seeing how that energy was theirs to begin with. Hearts beating as one, they were now truly mates. That specific pact was half demonic, half angelic, basically using knowledge from both realms, once again, intended for the balance that would be needed for the procedure to succeed. Kazumi let out a breath, before sighing happily, so far so good, I wasn't sure if it would work at the start. In a different voice, she spoke once again, at least place some trust in me, geez. Naruto laughed, this is simply incredible. Yukari-san and Q-chan are really in there, voicing their thoughts when opinions differ. Kazumi blinked, what do you mean? Shaking his head in amusement, and you two don't even realize it, do you? Ah, now that you tell me. The scarlet orb glowed, talk about two heads are better than one. We're the perfect example of that. Golden followed. True, true. Naruto then sat up, eyebrows raised. Oh, there we go, now I can tell who's who. Huh, what are you on? Even as Q-chan spoke from within, where pale skin resided on the right arm, it was now replaced by a thin layer of red fur, soft and neat, stretching all the way to her palms, where the second difference would be noted, fingernails lengthening to mimic a claw. Surprisingly enough, the transformation ended there, and the reason was made apparent when she spoke again. Ah, the fur's just there to act as a defensive measure, I didn't really think of it as a way to tell the difference. Ah, Yukari-san retained her bracelet, I see. Oh that, well, you were the one to give it to me after all. At that, a smile grew on Kazumi's face. It was when Naruto was but 5, ever since he learned to save money, he had placed all the allowance he had aside, not buying anything for all of 2 months, and without Yukari knowing, he had went to an ornament store and picked up this particular aqua bracelet with tiny white beads decorating it. He had said it would look pretty on her and hence he decided to buy it. Yukari had been moved by this act and told Naruto she would never let it go. Naruto smiled as memories rushed through his mind, and as he stared at Kazumi once again, he couldn't help but chuckle. Just how long are we going to stay? Ah, said Redhead stared at their still connected body and shrugged. Well, I was kinda hoping for an encore. Naruto sighed, before reaching up and flicking her nose, earning him a squeal. We have to move. Surely someone would have detected the chakra surge by now. Gently lifting her, he formed a simple seal and within seconds, energy soared around them, writhing around their bodies, tracing their features and voila, they were fully dressed. Not too shabby, but the material could be more comfortable. Kazumi muttered as she squirmed around, trying to get used to the new clothing. Seeing how both of them contained the knowledge of demonic arts, especially those of the Kitsune clan, illusions were too easy. Creating clothes from nothing was but the basics, and without even trying, Naruto could cast hundreds of the so-called genjutsu, with minimum effort. The blonde understood his status. He wasn't just a human anymore, yet he didn't belong to the demons classification, and definitely not a half-demon, the rumored Hanyu. Truth be told, those known as Hanyu would be very rare, given how there were very little species that would even consider mating with humans. Not only would the energy fusion like the one Naruto and Kazumi underwent destroy a normal human's body structure, but the very lifestyles of demons and humans differed by far. Jinchuriki were just that, capsules. They host a demon, and that was as far as the association with demons went. Humans' own prejudice led them to believe the foolishness that classified those Jinchuriki as Hanyu. Naruto, however, was no longer a Jinchuriki, for Q-chan was now residing in another body, not as a demon, but more as an archdemon, one of much higher status than any other of the same race. The powers she now held were not only her own, but those of Naruto and Yukari combined. That led to mutations, or rather, progressions in strength and abilities, leading her to understand techniques outside of the Kitsune clan abilities, some that would prove vital if she were to carry out her goal of one day returning and showing what she could really do. Yukari, on the other hand, entered as a soul, but the thing was, that she had been a very pure soul. Despite her time on the battlefield, and how she assumed that she had committed sins that were beyond salvage, Shinigami-sama sure had a different view. As a shinobi, kills were often unusual. A god would not be as stupid to think that a woman who had taken a life for her job would be sinful to the extent where she had to be thrown into the abyss. This woman had been praying, wanting only to see her loved one before she gladly accepted death as punishment. This in turn allowed Shinigami-sama to turn the case over to Kami-sama, and while that was being carried out, Naruto had rushed into the rescue. Be it a coincidence or not, Yukari was actually given the position of an archangel, just before Naruto broke her out of her own death realm. This in turn gave Yukari-san a holy setting, and that was the reason why their energies, red for Kyuubi, golden for her, clashed with each other during fusion. It was only after Naruto made love to her that both souls felt at peace and relaxed to set aside their drastic differences and undergo the merge wholeheartedly. Yukari didn't know any of this, seeing how no one would inform her of such decisions, but given how the balance was so perfect, that was the conclusion Naruto had drawn. If Yukari had been but a wandering soul, the fusion process would have taken much longer, and without a doubt, Kyuubi had explained all this to the ex-kunoichi at this very moment. Kazumi had appeared to be pensive for moments, before a smile lit up her face. Well, this is quite the predicament. Indeed it was. Not only was Naruto an outcast for both hell and heaven, Kazumi, due to the actions committed by Kyuubi and Naruto, would also follow him on the same route. One just did not fool two gods and get away with it. The fact that there had been no demons or angels tracking them down to kill them was quite the surprise. Perhaps the gods were in a good mood. Shaking his head in exasperation, Naruto sighed, "Where are we?" Kazumi closed her eyes for a moment, before a reply was given, 10 miles east of Hino Kuni. I see. Well, as much as I hate to disappoint the old man, I don't intend in returning to that place anytime soon. His eyes narrowing, he continued, "We'll be off to Kiri. So soon." Tapping a finger against her lip, she shrugged, "Ah well, why not? So busy, Naruto-kun." The second voice sounded, and as that happened, the third change to Kazumi's body occurred. Naruto could only watch in slight surprise as the white streaks of hair present within the forest of red overlapped the crimson. Now, The left side of the head showed a sheath of snow-white strands, contrasting against the scarlet on the right. Could it be that the body isn't used to having two souls individually doing stuff, and decides to accommodate for the change? Naruto mumbled, finding it incredible that even after so long, the fusion was continuing. Of course, the process would continue for at least 3 days before it can be concluded. Don't be surprised if we look completely different. After all, what we were just now was a newborn. Kazumi winked, before stretching her arms and yawning, but man, are we tired. Naruto lifted his arm and laced it around her shoulder, pulling her close, feeling the warm breath of hers against his chest, then rest. Kazumi gave a small sound of approval, before closing her eyes, so considerate, Naruto simply held her as he stood, staring up into the sky, wondering what would become of them. Roaming this place without a plan would be foolish. His power was given to him for a reason. He was entrusted by his father to accomplish great things that his father had no chance to achieve. Naruto himself wanted to see an end to the tragedies similar to his. The simple fact was that Jinchuriki were under constant prejudice and scrutiny of common citizens, as though they weren't similar human beings just like everyone else. Being treated like a demon, killed or beaten for no reason at all, shaped into weapons, all of these were common scenarios in the other countries. Naruto had been fortunate enough to have been in Konoha, for there were after all, more open-minded people than certain, idealistic, individuals. He had heard Yukari's thoughts, and he agreed. The paradise that used to be in this world had long since been gone. Back in the days where people could live peacefully, where might did not make right, and everyone had an equal say to how their life should be. But because of the existence of different countries, different shinobi and different leaders, things began to change. Circumstances arose, economies deteriorated, hatred grew. Then rose the rich, who thought they could buy their way through everything, and even till this day, several of them hold major positions within the countries. To fight against such powerful individuals, clans were formed. Classic example where people try to fight quality with quantity. Old minds with old ways of thinking, an unwillingness to admit their wrongs, not wanting to accept the changes that came with time, choosing instead to stick with their frail, ancient lifestyles, leading more and more people to ruin. Of course, there were some that survived with cunningness and at times, sheer brilliance, yet this did not always happen. Hence they needed a backup. Soon, they decided to form clans for people with unique characteristics, similar powers, and related skills. This, in the shinobi world, soon grew common, and before long, bloodline limits occurred. What was simple mutation of genes given their constant interaction with different chakra types grew under the conditions of natural selection, where survival of the fittest came into play. Human beings worked the same as any other beast, because they too were a part of the cycle of life, and at the end of the day, a human lived to survive. Because of these bloodline limits, people were given an advantage, and because of that advantage, they held a higher social standing compared to normal people. Ever since Naruto was young, he understood the most basic concept about human beings. There were two types of them. Good and bad. It was as simple as that, and even with all this knowledge within his mind, he agreed with his first discovery. Everything came down to this. The only thing that could change would be a person's perception of those terms. And it was exactly this perception that led to the tragedy within Kiri. His father's memories and Kyuubi's information had given him much insight to one particular event that no other country had tried to stop. The purge of bloodlines. Because bloodlines were mutations, it meant that those with advantages were clearly less than those without, and those without usually reacted to this situation in two ways. They either accepted them, or they hated them. Those with bloodlines were direct threats to their survival, and because of this primal instinct, prejudice grew, and for countries like Mizu, it was a sad sight. Terrorized under the Mizukage's rule, the people had long since grown to understand the meaning of follow orders. The Mizukage despised people better than him, and because of that, he ordered all those with bloodlines to be killed on sight. Anyone that dared side with them would be killed too. No exceptions. The people understood this well enough after several public executions of their kin were held. No one dared to stand up to the Mizukage. Be it cities, or tiny villages, there was nowhere for them to hide. To think one would be killed on sight simply because of a gene alteration that they had no control over, it was the exact kind of thing Naruto despised. True, there were those who abused their bloodlines, and for them to be killed, it was doing the world a favor. But what about those who had no desire for violence? Bloodline limits exist over a huge variety, none of the abilities were born to mark the user as good or bad. However, the humans in Mizu no Kuni were mere sheep, following the tide because of their weakness, vulnerability, and utter lack of confidence. They were used to be ruled by fear, and would continue for as long as it happened. Hence, over the years, sadists within Kiri grew, ones who thrilled in kills, engorged in the sprays of blood, lived for the screams of pain. They were taught that way after all. There was no room for mercy in this world, to show any would be leading to one's own demise. Naruto gritted his teeth as he gazed up at the sky once again. Definitely, Kiri first. Kazumi opened her left eye, revealing her golden pupil, before smiling. Such a righteous person. Not really. I just don't want to see more people end up like I do. His voice was firm and his expression serious, and Kazumi couldn't help but shake her head. Don't you feel weird, having to make all these decisions even though you were but a 6-year-old a day ago? In answer to her question, Naruto had kissed her deeply, before grinning. Is that something a 6-year-old would do? The scarlet eye opened this time. I seem to clearly remember a certain someone doing that exact thing to me when he was 6. What had been a tense atmosphere changed instantly to a playful one. I was pretty sure I didn't use tongue back then. You were this giant fox, remember? The golden orb dimmed slightly. You kissed him when he was 6. Such a pedophile. Hey, it wasn't like that. Arguing with herself, Hugh-chan growled. This brat here started it. I should have done that then, and to think I missed my chance all this while. Mew mew. Who's the pedophile here? Naruto fought the urge to sweat drop and mentally told himself that this would indeed need some getting used to. Sighing to himself, he snapped his fingers to get Kazumi's attention. Come now, they're getting close. We need to get out of here. Kazumi pouted. We can take him. Naruto stared at her incredulously. What for? Well, don't you wanna see how awesome your new powers are? Blinking like an innocent angel, the female assumed the purest expression she could muster, which was surprisingly good. Fighting off the twitch that developed above his eyebrow, Naruto pinched the bridge of his nose. No, I do not. I'll test them when I need to. Kazumi flicked out her tongue, brushing her long hair off her shoulder. All right, let those noobs live for now. Kazumi, did I just hear the word noob? A cheerful nod came his way too. What the heck does that even mean? Naruto, and here we thought you had all those information in your brain. No, I don't think that has anything to do with the word noob. Besides, I'm pretty sure that vocab did not appear in the 1,000-year memory vault that I inherited from you. This time, a massive drop of sweat did appear, though from where, he did not know, nor did he want to know. You see, noob is the word we use when people are too useless, stupid, worthless, idiotic, pathetic, weak, retarded, and many more to come. Be grateful that we can't be bothered finishing the list. Her dreamy expression as she tapped her lip did not fit her comment just then. Naruto added one last question. So, where did you get that word? We made it up. Isn't it obvious? Shaking his head in disbelief, he took off, vanishing from the area without any trace of chakra. Kazumi blinked again. Era. Tapping into their link, she too dashed after her mate, Mew. Why did you leave us behind? With a flaming cloak billowing behind him, dressed in a plain white combat suit, with orange stripes across his torso, Naruto rolled his eyes. Do you have to ask? Similarly, with a smooth black cape tracing down to as low as the soles of her feet, wearing a no-sleeve jacket, Kazumi grumbled, Mew, you're so mean. What is it with you acting like a 5-year-old? Mew, I'm a newborn, remember. Be happy I don't go, goo goo a ga, on you. Not knowing how to react to that, Naruto chose to remain silent as the surroundings rushed past them. Leaving behind no chakra source, the blonde was confident that Sarutobi Gigi wouldn't be able to find them. He would return there one day, but now was not the time, not when there was so much left to be done outside in the world. Oh yes, the world would soon realize his existence, whether they liked it or not. In a small village off the sides of Mizu no Kuni. Oh Ka-san. Look, I can make ice float. Hora. A young girl laughed happily as she scooped up some snow off the ground and holding it in her palms, she pushed it into the air, and with some unseen force, was able to maintain its position. Grinning at her mother cheekily, she squealed yet again, "Isn't that cool?" Beside her, dropping the basket of herbs she had been holding, Fuyuki Aoi slapped a hand over her mouth in horror, knowing that her worst fear had come true. Without hesitation, she cried out, "No! You can't do that. Forget about it." Swatting the snow her daughter created onto the ground, she firmly grasped her by the shoulders. "Why? Why must this happen to you? Oh Ka-san! Oh Ka-san!" The girl shivered at the fearful expression on her mother's face, and couldn't help but whisper, but aren't you happy? I thought that seeing me do this would make you happy." "No. I'm sad. Very sad that you did that. Never do that in front of anyone, am I clear?" Her voice was shaking, her pupils contracting as many thoughts assaulted her mind. The only good thing she knew was that no one had been around to witness this. As long as her daughter didn't do it again, they would be safe. Yes, they would be safe. "Oh Ka-san." The girl stared at her worriedly. "I'm sorry. Really sorry. I won't ever do that again. So please, don't. Oh, my poor child. I'm sorry, so sorry." Tears drifted down her cheeks as she held her child close. It was a tragic tale. She had been the last of her clan, Fuyuki, said to be able to summon a storm of hail in the blink of an eye, raging havoc upon enemies in an instant, but because the Mizukage gave the order for all those with bloodlines to be executed without question, their clan had been taken by complete surprise. Half of them were killed in their sleep, while the others were sent on suicide missions and taken care of. She had been part of the ones that successfully escaped, but before she knew it, the rest were all dead, giving up their lives so that both daughter and mother could get out of this alive. She chose to stay on the close outskirts of the country, choosing to trust the old saying, "The safest place is usually the most dangerous place." And that had been her only hope. She had seduced a seemingly honest man in this little village a year ago, and convinced him to marry her, even though she had a child. The man had been a gentleman, not asking any questions as to where she was from, treating her like a real husband would, and basically, tending to her every need. Aoi was eternally grateful for the man, and couldn't help but feel slightly guilty for letting the man believe she truly loved him. But she had no choice. In this cruel world, this was the only way she would survive. She would do anything to ensure her child lived on. The only thing that prevented her from using her powers would be the hunter nins that prowled the countrysides on a regular basis. In an all-out fight, she had no idea if she could win, not when her child would be left defenseless by the sides. Embracing her child while sobbing, she pulled her as close to her as possible. "I'm sorry. They're over there." That shout alone was enough to bring her out of her reverie. Standing up in an instant, her eyes locked onto the source of the voice. There, pointing at the both of them, was the man she had seduced, with an evil smirk on his face, plus a huge bag of gold in his hands. "Don't let them escape." Gritting her teeth in anger, "You. Yes, me. I knew something was wrong when you came to me. I'll admit you were a good lay, but sorry babe, that's all you meant to me." As more villagers appeared behind him, each with their own weapons, but don't feel sad, I'm pretty sure the feeling was mutual. 29-year-old Fuyuki Aoi lashed out in anger, eyes glowing aqua as she called forth her chakra, "You'll regret this." The little girl, seemingly cowed by her mother's anger, quickly hid behind her, not wanting her mother to be like this. "Mama." The man didn't seem scared at all. On the other hand, he looked positively cheeky. "Ha. Stupid mutants. Get that worthless bloodline out of here." Wah. Uck. As quickly as the powers rose, Aoi fell to the ground, vision wavering before her. "How? Do you think I would be so stupid as to not know who you are?" Fuyuki Aoi, last of the Fuyuki clan. His sneer increased as Aoi's breath became slightly more erratic. "What's the matter? Oh Snow Lady. Can't take the heat. What did you do to me?" A completely illogical emotion began to well up in her heart, her skin becoming sensitive to every tiny touch, and as a barely suppressed moan left her lips, she knew what it was. "Oh, nothing much, just some aphrodisiac. Isn't it just ironic that they were made from the herbs you sell, haha." A downright lustful expression appeared on his face. "The depressant seems to be working well too, everything is going according to plan." The heat surged throughout her body, forcing her to undergo sensations that were completely unnatural in this situation, making her extremely vulnerable. The fact that she couldn't even feel her chakra, much less focus on her surroundings, made it all the worse. Now, it's about time I shared the fun, don't you agree, guys? She's an exceptionally good lay, if I do say so myself. His disgusting words were agreed with by a cheer of lowly sneers and revolting cat calls. Oh Ka-san. What's wrong, mama? Don't scare me like that. Run. Get out of here. Unable to form a speech properly, she soon found herself grasped by the hair and dragged away from her daughter, leading her towards a group of repulsive villagers that were already readying themselves for the feast that was to come. What are you doing to Oka-san? Get away from her. Or I. With her small shaking hands, she scooped up some snow. I'll beat you up. Ha 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 ha. Look at that. Would you look at that? The girl thinks she is so powerful that she can just take us on. Why don't we teach her a lesson? No, my daughter, always simply couldn't help it. The feelings were too much, and it was well known that Fuyuki clan members were weakened by heat. Such an underhanded move, she had never expected mere civilians to use such methods, and that was where she had lost. Underestimation was never a good thing. Now, why don't you put on a show for your daughter, I'm sure she will learn well after we're done with you. Hands groping all over her, nauseating tongues dragged along her skin, fingers fighting to rip the clothing off her, and yet all she could feel was a pleasure that didn't belong to her. Unable to respond with anything but shivers and groans, Aoi relented herself to her fate. This wasn't the first time a woman was raped and killed, and the possibility that it would occur to her had been in her mind, but the way that it was carried out was certainly different. Oh Ka-san. I'm so sorry. The area was suddenly engulfed by a strong wind, forcing the assailants away from a delirious Aoi, and before long, the air was filled with screams of pain way louder than those hesitant moans of hers. No longer was she a captive in those sickening bonds, but rather, in a pair of strong arms that held her close, a warmth that should have been repelling to her that felt ever so alluring. Before she knew it, a kiss was placed on her lips, and just like that, she lost conscious. The silent command of rest echoed through her mind, and rest she did. Nearby, the villager that had been holding the young lady shivered in fear. Who are you? What is the meaning of this? Shrieks of pain left his mouth as 5 claw-like scars appeared on his face, forcing him to let go of the little girl who had been struggling non-stop since her mother was caught. Such vile humans. They didn't hurt you, did they, girl? A soft voice whispered from behind her, causing her to look down at the new set of arms that held her, especially the soft red fur on the right arm. Oh. Tilting her head upwards, she came face to face with a smirking lady. Subconsciously, she reached up and tentatively touched her hair, so pretty. Laughing, the lady nuzzled her hair in return. Oh, you're so cute. Cute. The expression on her face would soon be deemed the most kawaii look to ever grace this world by a certain feminine individual. Kya. Hugging her even more tightly than before, she cooed, definitely have to keep you. Ah, you're just such a darling. Oh Ka-san. Why is that man holding her? Tilting her head in confusion, she turned to the friendly lady again. His hair is pretty too. I know, right? Ruffling her hair, but don't worry, it'll be okay now. Watch as that man takes care of the bad guys. Oh, okay. And with that said, the little girl simply said back, leaning against the lady who showed such enthusiasm in hugging her as much as she could. By the way, what's your name? Name. Yeah, I'm Kazumi, what's yours? Ah, nice to meet you, Kazumi-san. I am Haku, Fuyuki Haku Daizu. That was the day where they met, 2 females of the Fuyuki clan who would later on play an important role in Naruto's mission. Aoi and Haku.